Egyptian mythology. The daily life of the god of the desert. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1. Desert God. Kill the supreme god and seize the power of the sun to survive. A hoarse and dark whisper sounded in his ears. Seth slowly opened his eyes, full of fatigue and helplessness. I have slept for another year. Sighing silently, Seth looked at his heart. There was a crack running through his body, filled with the breath of death, darkness, and decay. If he were an ordinary person, he would have died long ago, but he was the god of the desert and just lost some of his memories. Retracting his gaze, Seth glanced at the magnificent temple built of yellow sand, as desolate as ever. There was nothing except the walls, the murals on the dome, and his throne. Outside the temple was an endless desert with no end in sight. After coming to this world for decades, Seth had become accustomed to this desolate appearance. Of course, habit does not mean liking. No one stipulates that the god of the desert must like the desert. Seth supported his face with one hand and sat on the throne made of yellow sand in a daze. Still no god comes to find me. After mumbling, Seth slowly extended his finger, pointed to the air, and said a name. Antis. As soon as the words fell, a ball of motionless yellow sand quickly gathered in the air. In the blink of an eye, the yellow sand turned into a yellow sand bird, which landed on the ground, bowed its head and shouted, "Master." Seth looked at the yellow sand bird and said nothing. Suddenly, Seth felt a sharp pain in his heart, and his face did not change. Snap! The yellow sand bird exploded and there was no sound. The severe pain slowly faded away. Failed again. Seth expected it. In his memory, after the original Seth was injured, he returned to the temple to recuperate. But he didn't expect that he couldn't heal his injuries, and his injuries began to worsen. Later, he even fell into a deep sleep from time to prevent the further deterioration of his injuries with all his heart and soul. As a result, the original body could not leave the throne. After Seth arrived, he tried to summon his servants to seek help from the god of life. Giving a servant a real name will use some of his divine power, so that he cannot stop the injury from getting worse. This forced Seth to give up his servant and take back his divine power. Since it was not feasible to find him actively, Seth waited for other gods to come to him. But no god came, which made Seth speechless. However, what most dissatisfied Seth was the creator god, Ra. According to his memory, this god Ra, who holds the power of the sun and ascends to the highest position of god, he created all things in the world and the gods in chaos and floods. However, when the world was born, a dark demon snake Apep jumped out of the flood and covered the light of the sun. The demon snake attacked Ra with darkness, death, and chaos, wanting to kill the sun and destroy the new world. The gods who had already been born rushed forward to fight, but were all beaten back. At this time, Ra went up to fight with the demon snake, and finally Apep was killed by Ra, and the sun shone on the earth again. However, the demon snake has the power of death, and he will not really die. Therefore, whenever the demon snake resurrects and darkness falls, Ra will kill the demon snake again. Unlike the beginning of the world, when Ra fights the demon snake now, there will be two main gods to help. The upper gods and lower gods below the main gods are not able to help. It happened that Seth was one of the main gods, and it was his turn with the god of wisdom Thoth to help Ra kill the demon snake. In the past, Ra would block all the attacks of the demon snake, but something went wrong that time. As a result, Seth's heart was pierced by the fangs of the demon snake and was seriously injured. After killing the demon snake, Ra did not help with treatment, but instead drove the 10,000-year ship to patrol the underworld. After Seth told Thoth that he would not be on duty for the time being, he entered the temple deep in the desert to heal. But the injury gradually worsened until he could not leave the temple. Ra never cared about Seth's injury, and Ra's power could easily heal him. The original Seth and the current Seth were very dissatisfied. The words that woke him up from his sleep every time were probably the original Seth's obsession. "It's a pity that I can't beat him. The power of the supreme god is not something he can contend with." Muttering, Seth changed his hand to support his face, his eyes looking at the desolate desert. Suddenly, Seth saw a woman standing outside the temple. She wore a throne-style crown, black hair and red lips, and a blue and white woven linen dress. On her neck was a wezek made of lapis lazuli, ruby, blue crystal, and gold. On her arms, wrists, and ankles were gold-made rings engraved with intricate lotus patterns. Seeing this woman, Seth suspected that he had hallucinations. Can gods hallucinate? The woman walked into the temple with a worried look on her face, and soon walked in front of Seth. Little brother. Hearing the voice and sensing the breath of God, Seth became excited. It was not an illusion, it was really Isis, Sister Isis. Inheriting Seth's original memory, Seth naturally called her sister. He gave life to his servants in order to seek Isis's help. Isis, the god of life, magic, and marriage, the main god. In addition to Isis, he also has his brother Osiris and sister Nephthys. His father is the god Geb and his mother is the goddess Nut. Geb and Nut were born to Shu and Tefnut. Shu and Tefnut are the first two gods created by Ra. Brother, you are so injured. Why don't you ask me for help? Isis was worried, but there was some blame in her words. Seth looked bitter. I also want to ask you to help me, sister, but my injuries have worsened to the point that I can't give my servant a real name. Isis was distressed when she heard this, and took out a palm-sized pottery jar with a sun pattern and handed it to him. Brother, this is the blood given to you by the god Ra. It can heal you. Given by the god Ra? Seth was a little surprised. Yes. Isis nodded. You haven't shown up for decades, and you are not in the temple you usually stay in. I, Osiris, and Nephthys are a little worried about your injury. It just so happens that this year is my turn. After killing Apep, I mentioned this to Ra and asked Ra to find your location. After Ra finds you, he will give you a drop of blood to restore you. Seth looked at the sun-patterned pottery with a complicated expression. The blood of the sun god was indeed enough to restore him to his original state, but it was decades late. Thank you, sister. Seth took the pottery and thanked Isis. Heal your injuries first. Isis was still worried about Seth. Seth nodded and opened the pottery. A golden light burst out in the pottery. After a moment, the golden light dissipated, and Seth poured a drop of golden blood from the pottery. The golden blood lay quietly in Seth's hand, and he could feel the extremely hot and powerful power. It was the heat of the sun, as if he was under the scorching sun. After looking at the blood of the sun god for a while, Seth put the blood into his mouth. Red divine patterns appeared on Seth's skin. They slowly gathered towards Seth's heart. The wound that pierced Seth's heart also changed. Black scales emerged, exuding the decaying smell of death. Not only that, those scales slowly formed the shape of a curved snake. Isis frowned beside him, becoming more and more worried about her brother. Chapter 2 God's Covenant. Seth responded flawlessly to Isis's concerns at this moment. The drop of blood from Ra burst out with powerful force. It drove all his divine power into his heart, and a powerful force also burst out from the side of his heart and poured into his heart. It was swallowed up by Ra's blood in just a moment. Before the wound burst out again, Ra's blood completely swallowed it. The wound that pierced through his body healed quickly, and Seth closed his eyes and felt the power of the god of the desert. Isis watched the black scales on Seth's wound dissipate, and felt Seth's breath recover, and couldn't help but smile. After a long while, Seth opened his eyes and let out a long breath. He stood up from the throne, no longer feeling weak, wearing the Okapi crown, white hair and golden eyes, and wearing a blue, red and white linen skirt. On his neck is wez made of lapis lazuli, topaz, citrine, and gold. On his arms, wrists, and ankles are golden rings engraved with yellow sand. At this moment, he is the true god of the desert, power, and war at the level of the main god. All the memories lost due to the injury were also remembered. This world with gods is exactly the same as the names of the ancient Egyptian gods in his memory. If nothing unexpected happens, it is the world of ancient Egyptian mythology. Brother, have you recovered completely? Isis asked with a smile. Seth nodded. All recovered. Then I am relieved. Isis said. Seth wanted to ask Isis something, but a visitor who surprised Seth came to the temple. A golden falcon flew into the temple and landed on the ground. It flashed with golden light and turned into a 10-year-old boy wearing a linen skirt. The little boy stretched out his hands forward and raised his hands slightly. Lord Seth, Lord Isis. Seth and Isis looked at each other, both surprised by the appearance of the little boy. Falcons are the incarnation of Ra, and they are also the messengers of Ra. Whenever Ra has something to convey, he will use messengers to convey the message. Speak. Seth looked at the messenger and said. The little boy raised his hand and said, after 30 solar days, Ra will convene a meeting of gods in the pantheon. Seth was a little surprised when he heard this. There are two kinds of meetings of gods. One is convened by Shu, the god of order, to resolve disputes among the gods. The other is convened by Ra, the supreme god, to convey oracles. According to his memory, the last time Ra convened a meeting of gods was 1,000 years ago. It was to resolve the problem that Osiris, Isis, him, and Nephthys could not ascend to the throne. The last time was 10,000 years ago, when Ra asked the gods to leave the Sun City and build a temple on the ground. Seeing Seth lost in thought, Isis waved to the waiting messenger. The messenger turned into a golden falcon again and flew out of the temple. Hearing the movement, Seth pulled himself out of his memories and said, Sister Isis, did Ra tell you about convening a meeting of gods? Isis thought for a moment and said, Ra said that there have been new changes in the underworld recently. The meeting of gods should be about the underworld. Seth searched the underworld in his memory, but he found that he had very few memories about the underworld. He only knew that to enter the underworld, he had to go to the west of the Nile River, which was transformed by the flood. There was a tributary of the Nile River, called the Styx. It was covered by cold white fog all year round, and there was no life, only dead souls. At the end of the Styx was the gate to the underworld. The dead would jump into the Styx and follow the river into the underworld, waiting for a new life. In addition, after killing Apep, Ra would take the 10,000-year ship to cruise into the underworld. Seth had never entered the underworld and had never understood the underworld, so he only knew these. Little brother, thought said that the breath in the underworld will corrode everything with life. Isis patted Seth on the shoulder and said, even gods will be corroded. The underworld has nothing to do with our authority, so there is no need to care. Seth felt that he had just recovered and should enjoy the fun of being a god. What you should care about is Nephthys. Isis smiled. Hearing this, Seth coughed twice and looked at Isis in disbelief. Isis smiled brightly. Little brother, don't hide it. Your love for Nephthys is unconcealed. I already know it. During the decades when you disappeared, Nephthys often came to me to ask about you. She also often went to your temple to look for you. Obviously she loves you. Now that you have recovered, marry Nephthys. No, Seth refused categorically. Sister Isis, I no longer admire Nephthys. According to memory, the original Seth did love Nephthys. It's just that Seth never expressed his love to Nephthys. If it was the original Seth, he would definitely listen to Isis. But now Seth can clearly remember a myth. Seth was jealous of Osiris's fame and jealous of Nephthys' love for Osiris, so he chose to kill Osiris. The first time Osiris was resurrected by Isis. The second time Seth killed Osiris again, cut him into pieces and threw him into the Nile. Isis and Nephthys searched for Osiris' body parts, but they were always missing one piece. Without one piece, Osiris could not be resurrected again. Isis had no choice but to give birth to Osiris' child, hoping that the child would take revenge on Seth when he grew up. After Seth knew about it, he hunted down Isis and Horus, who was born to her. But Nephthys helped Isis and Horus escape. She also asked Anubis, her son with Seth, to mummify Osiris and send him to the underworld to become Hades. Not only that, she also helped Horus, who had grown up, defeat Seth. Nephthys did this because she loved Osiris. Anubis was also her child with Osiris. With this memory, Seth would never let it happen. Isis felt strange looking at Seth's determined look. Love that lasted for thousands of years suddenly disappeared. Seth looked directly at Isis. Sister, I really don't love Nephthys anymore. His golden eyes were full of honesty. Isis didn't feel any love in Seth's eyes when he mentioned Nephthys. She accepted this fact. Alas, Nephthys will be sad. Seth looked away and thought to himself, he was sure that Nephthys would not be sad. Isis would be sad. According to memory, Isis and Osiris had already concluded a marriage. But according to mythology, it was Nephthys who gave birth to Anubis first. Sister, the blue and gold god also loves Nephthys. Seth said, You can go to the blue and gold god and let him express his love. Isis was worried about him and asked for Ra's help. Seth naturally didn't want Isis to be sad. Chapter 3, Evil Gods and Faith. The god of blue and gold. Isis muttered, "Does he love Nephthys?" "He loves him." Set was very sure. The original Set had asked the god of blue and gold for confirmation when he heard the news. After getting a positive answer, he beat the god of blue and gold. "Okay, I'll go find him." Isis made a decision. She also told Set to mobilize more divine power to flush the divine body, so as to prevent Apep from leaving any obscure means. Apep controls chaos, does not have wisdom, but has strange and obscure means. "I know," Set nodded seriously. "If it concerns himself, he will definitely mobilize divine power to flush the divine body every day." Isis turned into a gust of wind and left, looking very anxious. Set understood that the authority of God determines the power of God. Like Isis, she has the triple authority of magic, life, and marriage. She wants to increase her power, and the most convenient way is to encourage gods to marry each other. The marriage of gods can greatly increase her power. On the contrary, if a large number of species with life die, a large number of marriages will be dissolved, and the number of people learning magic will decrease. Although Isis still controls the three powers, her power will be greatly weakened. His elder sister is proud and will not tolerate herself becoming weak. Seth shook his head and stopped thinking about these things, and said, "Go." A gust of wind and sand blew, and a huge yellow sand bird formed entirely of yellow sand was formed. "Master." Seth walked to the back of the flying bird and sat down, saying, "Go to the nearest oasis." The yellow sand bird flapped its wings and flew south. According to memory, 80% of the world created by Ra is a desert covered with yellow sand. The remaining 20% is the Nile River formed by the flood, and the grasslands and forests formed by the tributaries of the Nile River. There are also large and small oases in the desert. The original Seth did not pay much attention to the humans created by Ra, even if they worshipped and believed in him. Seth wanted to see the humans and taste their food. The flavor of food from another world makes people drool just thinking about it. Suddenly, a black snake with wings and red eyes roared and flew towards Seth. The yellow sand bird turned back, opened its mouth and spit out a gust of sand to hit the black snake. In an instant, the black snake turned into meat flakes and fell to the ground with the wind and sand. The yellow sand bird turned its head and continued on its way. Seth didn't care about this. Monsters contaminated by Apep's blood lived in the desert. Like Apep, they were not wise, crazy, and liked to destroy. But in general, they would avoid oases, temples, and gods. However, some crazy monsters were not afraid, but would rush up to fight. Suddenly, a long white feather floated in front of Seth. The power of truth was attached to the feather. It was the feather of Mot, the main god Mot, the god of truth, justice, and fairness. What did she want to do with herself? With curiosity, Seth reached out and touched the feather. In an instant, the feather collapsed and turned into sacred texts. Sacred texts belong to hieroglyphics. After taking a look, Seth understood what was going on. According to Mot, an evil god appeared on a nearby oasis. Seth was nearby, so Seth was needed to destroy the oasis. "Evil god," Seth muttered, and let the yellow sand bird fly to the oasis where the accident happened. Half a solar day later, the yellow sand bird arrived above the oasis where the accident happened. Seth sat on the throne on the back of the yellow sand bird and looked down. The oasis, which was hundreds of miles in size, was covered with green plants. The lake was clear and bottom clear, with red fish swimming one after another. On the outermost lakeside, women were washing clothes and chatting, while men went into the water to catch fish. After catching the red fish, the men held the red fish and walked towards the center of the oasis. In the center of the oasis, wooden houses were arranged in an orderly manner. Children were playing barefoot in them. Just looking at this scene, the oasis seemed like a paradise on earth. Seth set his sights on the only stone building in the center of the oasis, a stone temple. The smooth stone was painted with unknown patterns, which looked extremely beautiful. The people in the oasis knelt and prayed devoutly in front of the temple. A man knelt in front of the stone temple. "Almighty God, please give us a good harvest." At the same time, a blank power came into being. Then a woman knelt in front of the stone temple. "Almighty God, please give me health." The blank power came into being again. This power fell into the stone building and soon became evil. Faith gave birth to evil gods. Seth confirmed the original Seth's memory. When humans pray devoutly, they will produce a blank power. If gods are integrated into themselves, their own divine power and authority will be polluted. If creatures are integrated into themselves, they will be driven by the content of faith and become evil gods. Seth took out his own ankh, which was only the size of a palm. It was shaped like a cross, but the upper part was not a cross, but an ellipse. This was the power condensed when each god was born, carrying the breath of God. Seth threw the ankh down. The ankh fell for a moment and then floated above the oasis, emitting a soft white light. This light enveloped the entire oasis. At this moment, everyone in the oasis looked up at the light in the air. Suddenly, a green light rushed out from the temple in the center of the oasis and flew towards the desert. However, at the edge of the oasis, a soft white light stopped him. Seth looked at the evil god who was half a sturdy young man and half a lizard covered with black scales, and felt nauseous. Obviously, a monster broke into the oasis and absorbed the empty power of faith. The people at the edge of the oasis saw the monster and worshipped and prayed madly. The empty power of faith fell on the monster and was absorbed by it in an instant, becoming evil. At the same time, Seth noticed that the monster's scales faded a little and became more human. The monster looked up at Seth's position and opened his mouth to speak. "I am God, the God who gives them a good harvest and health." Seth glanced at the monster and reached out to touch the man kneeling near the monster. In an instant, the man's body turned into yellow sand and fell on the green grass. The people around saw this scene and screamed and cried, but in the end, they all prayed to the monster. "God, Almighty God, please revive Nak." The power of the blank fell on the monster with the devout prayer. The monster's expression changed. "I am God, the God who resurrects people." After stuttering, the monster spit out green mist, covering the yellow sand that the man had turned into. After a while, the green mist dissipated, and the man who had just died appeared in the same place. Then, it collapsed into yellow sand again. The monster and the people in the oasis were stunned. Seth already knew the result. The power of faith does not represent authority. Without authority, the corresponding power cannot be exercised. Moreover, the prayers of believers will change the mind of God. How can such a God be considered a God? Chapter 4 Oasis. Seth glanced at the desert at the edge of the oasis. The endless yellow sand seemed to have life, quickly devouring the oasis. The evil god recovered from his stupor of not being able to revive the dead, and he tried to rush towards Seth. However, the powerful divine power emitted by Ankh bound him firmly in place. Facing the disappearance of the oasis, the believers soon had no escape from the swallowing of the yellow sand. They all knelt on the ground and prayed devoutly to the evil god. Many blank powers fell on the evil god, becoming evil. At the same time, he kept struggling, and his appearance was also changing. It didn't take long for him to become a real person. "You can't kill my believers." The evil god raised his head and roared at Seth. Seth didn't respond. In fact, if possible, he was too lazy to kill the evil god. The problem is that after the evil god absorbs enough faith, he will notice one thing. The power of faith can allow them to do some things that believers pray for example, a good harvest and health, but that is supported by the power of faith. Once the power of faith transformation is used up, the harvest will turn into plague and health will turn into death. This strong contrast will cause the evil god to want power. Thus, he attacks and hunts the gods, and at the same time craves for more faith. Unfortunately, the evil god cannot defeat the god who controls power, even if he is a weak lower god. Perhaps after the evil god has enough faith, he can hunt the lower gods. But the gods will not allow the evil god to grow to that point. Suddenly, the evil god screamed. Countless black scales emerged from his body, and his bones were also changing. Seth looked at the remaining oasis, which could only accommodate 2 people. There was only a girl who kept praying, the last believer of the evil god. She prayed in her mouth, praying to survive. Unfortunately, the yellow sand finally swallowed her. The oasis was completely buried under the yellow sand and became part of the desert. At the same time, the evil god completely shed his human appearance and turned into a huge black lizard. Without believers, he no longer has power. Seth took back the ankh, and the lizard fell on the desert. It was swallowed by the surging yellow sand and turned into minced meat. At this point, the evil god and his believers were all dead. Sitting on the back of the yellow sand bird, Seth raised his hand and wrote a series of holy book words, recording the story of the evil god and the believers. When he finished writing the last word, these holy book words twisted and merged, turning into a yellow sand bird the size of a palm. "Go find Mott," Seth said. The yellow sand bird flapped its wings and quickly disappeared from Seth's sight. As long as Mott was not seriously injured like him, or deliberately closed herself off, she would see it. "Go to the nearest oasis," Seth said. "Yes, master," the yellow sand bird replied respectfully. The pungent smell of spices, the smell of livestock such as cattle, sheep, and camels, the smell of baked bread, barbecue, and barley wine filled this oasis. Relying on the tributaries of the Nile River, Seth turned into an ordinary boy, walking among the pedestrians coming and going. After decades, seeing and contacting living people again, Seth found that he was not too excited. In fact, he had already discovered it when dealing with the evil god. For people, he cast a gaze from the perspective of God. In short, his self-perception is that of a god, not a human. Therefore, he was not bothered by killing all the people who believed in the evil god. "Is it because I merged with Seth's memory?" Seth muttered, but did not delve into it. Fusion is irreversible, and he only needs to know that he is Seth now. After solving a problem, Seth quickly walked to a stall selling scones. The golden baked scones were piled on one side, exuding an enticing aroma. "Brother, how many scones do you want?" the fat stall owner, wearing a half-skirt, asked with a smile. "3, Seth asked. "How much?" "6 copper coins." The stall owner smiled. Seth took out 6 copper coins and handed them over, and got 3 scones. After receiving them, Seth could not wait to eat them. The sweetness brought by chewing starch was enough to satisfy Seth for a moment. While eating, Seth walked towards the center of the oasis. In the center of the oasis was a small town surrounded by wood, and there should be more delicious food inside. On the way, Seth stopped in front of a stall of a woman in a linen dress with interest. It was not for any other reason, but because the woman was performing magic to the onlookers. "O source of magic, please grant your believers the power to control water," the woman chanted in a low voice. The next moment, a ball of water the size of a human head appeared in her hand. The onlookers exclaimed, and several merchants threw copper coins at the woman's feet. Seth bit the cake and walked away, but she was disappointed because her magic was too weak. However, Seth remembered that Isis had mentioned that she had the power to limit the magic of creatures. The specific reason was not given, but she did have restrictions. After all, magic belonged to Isis, and it was too easy for her to impose restrictions. "There is an abandoned well deep in the desert." An exaggerated and high-pitched female voice reached Seth's ears. After swallowing the last bite of the scones, Seth looked in the direction of the sound. He saw dozens of men surrounding a camel carrying a dozen bulging bags. In front of the camel stood a girl with wheat skin, green pupils, and 2 golden rings on her ears. She made an exaggerated expression and spoke to the people around her. "I dug in that dry well for a whole day. At night, I prayed to the moon god for most of the day. Then I dug up this big bag of gold." After saying that, the girl untied a cloth bag on the camel's back, revealing the gold inside. In an instant, the eyes of the people around her lit up. Several people wanted to reach out and touch it, but the girl unceremoniously opened their hands and tied the cloth bag tightly. "Don't touch it, I haven't touched it carefully yet," a bald man who was watching said with doubt in his eyes. "Are you really willing to hand over the map?" "Of course, how could I lie to you?" the girl answered firmly. Seth watched with interest and even bought a piece of barbecue to eat while watching. "It's rare for gods to trick people into digging for gold in the desert. There's a lot of gold in that well, and I can't dig it all by myself." The girl shrugged and said, "Why not share it? Everyone go dig." After saying that, the girl took out a stack of papyrus from the bag on the camel and distributed it to the onlookers. The maps were quickly distributed and snatched up. Those who got the maps left immediately. Seth curiously glanced at the map in one of the people's hands. The crooked lines and the markings in secular characters looked fake at first glance. "Is the barbecue delicious?" Hearing this, Seth looked at the girl who walked in front of him and smiled. "The spicy barbecue is not bad." "Really? I'll try it too." The girl walked to the place where Seth bought the barbecue just now and bought one. Chapter 5 The Cat's Trick. The girl bought the barbecue and took 2 bites. She shook her head in disdain. "It's not spicy at all." Seth swallowed the barbecue in 2 or 3 bites and threw the wooden stick aside. "I like this spiciness." The girl curled her lips and said, "Seth, I heard from Sekhmet that you disappeared." "I just hid to heal my wounds." Seth said, "Apep's power can compete with the god Ra." "That's right." The girl nodded. "Best. Is there anything delicious in the city?" Seth said the girl's name and asked. "The main god Best, the god of cats, protection, and dance." Best thought for a while and said, "There is a person in the city who cooks delicious snake meat, but he took the map I gave him to dig for gold. Otherwise, there is nothing delicious. There are no good spice merchants in this oasis." Seth was curious when he heard this. "Is it fun to lie to people?" In his memory, Best often appeared in human gathering places, teasing and playing tricks on humans in various identities. The most typical one was to induce people to dig for gold, just like what happened just now. Tell everyone that there is gold somewhere. As long as you follow the map, you can dig out a lot of gold. Then a group of people will go to dig gold according to the map. The same way, people are fooled every time, and Best never tires of playing this game. Best shook her head and denied, "I didn't lie. The map does record a precious thing. It's just that the group of people haven't dug it yet. When they dig it, you will know." "I hope that day will come soon," Seth said jokingly. "When that day comes, it may not be a good thing," Best muttered in a low voice. Seth heard it clearly, but did not continue the topic. He just said, "Since there is no delicious food here, I will leave first." "Well." Best nodded slightly. Leaving the crowd and walking out of the oasis, Seth called out the yellow sand bird. He was not in a hurry to go to the next oasis, but let the yellow sand bird go to a place. 5 days later, Seth stood in the air, looking at the empty desert, feeling that he seemed to have been deceived. There is no well here at all. To be precise, there is nothing here. He came here only out of curiosity about Best's words. As the god of the desert, he was sure that there was nothing here. "I have also become a victim of the cat's scam, and I took the initiative to be deceived." Seth smiled helplessly. "Forget it. Let's go to the nearby oasis." Sitting back on the back of the yellow sand bird again, Seth thought about something. Suddenly, a palm-sized house floated in front of Seth. Seth frowned. It was a letter from Nephthys, the main god Nephthys, the patron saint of fertility, houses, and the dead. He didn't want to have anything to do with Nephthys, but he couldn't let the letter follow him all the time. There was no way. Seth opened the letter. The content was roughly concerned about Seth. The gentle concern was not what Seth noticed, but what he noticed was, in the letter, Nephthys knew that Seth had recovered through the letter from Isis to Osiris, and she said that she and Osiris were very happy. Let's not talk about why Isis didn't tell Nephthys. Just the names of Nephthys and Osiris together made Seth feel something was wrong. There was always a feeling that Isis would be betrayed. Rubbing his brows, Seth felt a headache. The most familiar thing about ancient Egyptian mythology for him was the bloody story of Seth killing Osiris. He knew almost nothing about other stories. This was not the point. The point was that he was not sure that things would develop as he knew. He avoided Nephthys because he could not afford the consequences. The problem now was that Seth did not want to see Isis sad. This sister cared about him and helped him, and he wanted to make her happy, but he couldn't say, "Sister, Nephthys is hooking up with Osiris and will give birth to a child." If he said something that didn't happen, it would destroy Isis' trust in him. After thinking about it, Seth decided to go to Osiris. Isis should be busy matching the gods for marriage, and he happened to be looking at Osiris. By the way, he would apply some eye drops to Osiris to prevent him from betraying Isis. After making the decision, Seth raised his hand and wrote a thank you, and then the hieroglyphic text changed into a yellow sand bird and left. After that, Seth sent another letter to Isis. He asked her where Osiris was recently and he wanted to find him. While waiting for Isis to receive the letter and reply, Seth walked around the nearby oasis. Unfortunately, this oasis is not big, and there are basically no spice merchants coming. Fortunately, the people living here brew very delicious barley beer. Seth wiped the hops on his mouth and said to the old man selling wine, "Another glass." "Okay," the old man responded enthusiastically. Turning around, he took a glass of beer from a half-man-high pottery jar. The aroma of fermented barley, with a hint of sweetness. Seth ate a piece of fried snake meat and took a sip of wine, and his mood was relaxed. After eating and drinking, Seth also bought a pottery jar of wine to take with him, just as a gift to meet Osiris. Sitting on the back of the yellow sand bird, Seth let it fly to the temple where Osiris often stayed. He took a short nap. When Seth woke up, the night had already fallen. Today was a new moon, and the stars in the sky were particularly bright, as if they were replacing the moonlight to illuminate the earth. Seth looked at the stars and wondered how long they could shine. How long would it take for the father god Keb and the mother goddess Nut, who gave birth to the four gods, to bow to them? It should be soon, Seth said to himself. Then he forgot about this matter temporarily. The four of them had already decided how to repay the father god and the mother god for taking away their divine power, which almost prevented them from ascending to the throne. Now Seth felt that the original decision was very good, and he just had to wait for the right time to come. At this time, a green water lily floated in front of Seth, with the breath of Isis attached to it. Seth touched the lotus. The water lily collapsed into a series of holy book texts. After reading it quickly, Seth dispersed the text. Nephthys has already rejected the blue gold god, when he disappeared in the 30th year after being seriously injured. Seth admired the blue gold god a little. After being severely beaten by the original Seth, he dared to pursue Nephthys while Seth was recovering from his injury. Wasn't he afraid that Seth would beat him again after he recovered? It seems that this blue gold god really likes Nephthys. However, he has been rejected. Isis also said that Osiris was in the temple where he often stayed. At the same time, Seth also asked Seth to meet Nephthys in person once. She did not tell Nephthys that he had recovered. Tsk. It's a pity that she has already known it from Osiris. Seth narrowed his eyes and took out the ankh. The oval half-cross-shaped ankh was placed on the back of the yellow sand bird by Seth. The powerful divine power poured into the yellow sand bird, making it 100 times faster, the fastest speed. Seth said he wanted to get to the temple of Osiris as soon as possible. "Yes, Master." The yellow sand bird flapped its wings in response. Chapter 6 The Seed of Hathor. At the junction of forest and grassland, the giant tree with lush branches and leaves built the prototype of the temple. Vines filled the gaps, and golden and blue flowers bloomed on it. If possible, Seth wanted to appreciate this plant temple carefully. Unfortunately, there is no if. When he arrived here, Nephthys also arrived. The two met in this way. "Brother Seth, long time no see." Seth looked at Nephthys, who was sitting on the small house with a gentle face. On her golden long hair was a vine-like crown, brown pupils, a soft face, and a blue and white linen dress. On her neck was a wedge made of lapis lazuli, black crystal, sapphire, and gold. On her arms, wrists, and ankles were gold rings engraved with intricate patterns. This is Nephthys, the goddess that Seth originally loved. To be fair, Seth thought Nephthys was indeed beautiful. But, in the face of death, beauty is not as good as sand. Seth smiled and said, "Sister Nephthys, I am sincerely happy to see that you are safe and sound." Nephthys' face was full of sincerity. "Thank you." Seth thanked him and asked, "What are you doing here with Brother Osiris?" Nephthys took out a white crystal with 10 green seeds in it. "Hathor asked me to give these seeds to Brother Osiris." Hearing Hathor's name, Seth was stunned. The main god Hathor is the god of love, beauty, and music. She usually stays in the temple in the Sun City and basically does not appear in the sight of the gods. "What kind of seeds are these?" Seth asked with curiosity. Nephthys shook her head. "I don't know. She didn't say." "Let's give the seeds to Brother Osiris. He has been studying these seeds recently. Maybe Brother Osiris knows what they are." "Yeah." Seth nodded. The yellow sand bird and the small house landed at the entrance of the temple. Seth saw Osiris staring at a golden, full-grained wheat ear in the temple. Nephthys walked past Set and entered the temple. Osiris put down the wheat ears, smiled at Nephthys, and saw Set again. He immediately stood up, walked to Set, looked at Set carefully, and then let out a long sigh. "Thank goodness you're healed, my brother." Set looked at the man wearing a wheat ear crown, with green skin, golden pupils, and a tuft of beard on his chin tied up by a bronze ring. Wesh, who was wearing a blue linen skirt and a lapis lazuli, emerald, blue crystal, and gold on his neck, a strong man with gold rings engraved with divine patterns on his wrists, arms, and ankles. "This is Osiris, the main god of agriculture, plants, and fertility." For no reason, Set had a question in his mind. Why is Osiris green? He, Isis, and Nephthys all have normal skin colors. Is it because the boss has mutated? Although he complained in his heart, Set still felt the sincere brotherhood in Osiris' words. "Thanks to Sister Isis," Set said with a smile. "Anyway, you are healed." Osiris was full of smiles. "Brother Osiris, Hathor asked me to bring you some seeds," Nephthys said. Set walked into the temple and took over the conversation. Hathor didn't say what kind of seeds they were. "Brother, take a look and see if you recognizes these seeds." Nephthys handed the crystal containing the seeds to Osiris. Taking the crystal and opening it, Osiris placed the seeds in his palm. The warm green light flashed. Osiris was using his divine power. After a moment, Osiris said excitedly, "These are barley seeds that contain the breath of the sun, and they have stronger vitality. Even if they grow in an oasis in the desert, they will no longer reduce production." Set thought of the merchants walking between the oases in the desert. They sell furs, young animals, slaves, gold, and gems. But, the most common and most in demand are food and spices. Some oases do not grow food, but only grow expensive spices in exchange for food and other items. The reason why we know this is that many people have prayed in the temple of the desert god more than once. They prayed to Set to let the wheat seeds they planted have a good harvest, and some people even performed human sacrifices. Unfortunately, the original Set never responded to them. First, the authority of abundance and agriculture belongs to Osiris. Second, he hopes that the oasis lacks food. In that case, they will definitely start a war. As the god of war, Set is naturally happy to see war. Now Set feels that the original Set did nothing wrong. At the same time, he also knows that Osiris intends to use these seeds to expand his authority. "Brother Osiris, that's great. Haven't you always wanted to cultivate seeds that will not reduce production in the desert?" Nephthys said with a smile. "Yes." Osiris was still excited. "I was going to give up. With my authority, I can't affect the desert." Hearing this, Set thought of the origin of Hathor, who was the god transformed from the left eye of the god Ra. It is not difficult to produce seeds containing the breath of the sun. Nephthys showed a trace of worry at this time. "Brother Osiris, can these seeds be planted in the desert?" "If they can, if those humans plant them in the desert to breed, the desert will definitely disappear. Then Brother Set's authority will be damaged." She was worried about Set in her words. But Set always felt that this was a bit Was it his illusion? Considering that it might be because of that myth that affected his view of Nephthys, Set said, "It won't have an impact on the desert. The desert is completely under his control, unless the supreme god takes action, or someone gets his real name. Otherwise, he can control what can live and what can't live in the desert." Osiris heard this, looked at Set seriously, and said, "Don't worry, these seeds can't be planted in sand." "I believe you, big brother," Set smiled. This is the conclusion he came to based on his memory. In the original memory of Set, Osiris was an honest, trustworthy, and very frank big brother. Of course, this sign is for the three of them. If Nephthys really wanted to seduce Osiris, she might have taken advantage of this. "That's great," Nephthys said. "Brother Osiris, give them to the human tribes that believe anew as soon as possible." "No hurry." Osiris shook his head. "I need to breed enough seeds first." "Brother, have you asked Hathor to cultivate the seeds?" Set still cares about Hathor. After all, no one knows his real name except himself, and the name Set is a pseudonym without power. Only the power of the sun god can affect the desert and shake the source of his power. Chapter 7 Adoration. Osiris put the seeds away and shook his head. I didn't ask Hathor to cultivate barley seeds. She has been staying in the temple of the City of the Sun almost all the time. I have never seen her in private. Set looked at Nephthys, who was delivering the seeds. Little sister, did you ask Hathor to do it? No, Nephthys denied and explained. Goddess Ra is going to hold a meeting of the gods. I have nothing to do, so I went to the City of the Sun first. Hathor came to me and asked me to give the seeds to brother Osiris. Thank her after the meeting of the gods, and ask her again by the way, Osiris said. Many speculations flashed through Set's mind, but they were all unfounded speculations, and he could only do what Osiris said. Putting this matter aside for the time being, Set took out the barley beer he bought in the oasis. Try it, it's brewed by humans. Osiris became interested and said, okay. Nephthys stared at Set, as if she had just met him for the first time. Brother Set, have you been to the gathering place of humans? Set nodded. Yes. I've been in the temple for too long, it's too boring. Hearing this, Nephthys said nothing more, but a trace of anxiety flashed in her eyes. Among all the things created by God Ra, humans are the most interesting. Osiris smiled. Indeed, Set agreed. Nephthys said nothing, just smiled. Then Set distributed the beer to Osiris and Nephthys. It's fermented well. It tastes like desert barley. Osiris took a sip and commented. Set nodded in agreement, and at the same time thought of the sun wine in the City of the Sunday. According to his fused memory, the sun wine brewed by God Ra is a rare treasure. Unfortunately, the last time they drank the sun wine was a gift when they became the main gods. If they want to drink it again, unless a new main god is born. However, among thousands of gods, there are only more than 20 main gods. It can really be said that there is little hope. Seth, why are you suddenly unhappy? Osiris noticed Set's mood and asked with concern. Set sighed and said, I thought of Ra's sun wine. Osiris understood, and he also sighed. I understand you. After a while of mutual pity, Set, Osiris, and Nephthys chatted and drank. Of course, it was mainly Set and Osiris chatting. Nephthys watched from the side and occasionally interrupted. Brother, there are people offering sacrifices in the nearby temple. I'll go there. Suddenly, Osiris said to Set. After saying that, Osiris also smiled at Set with deep meaning. Then he quickly left the temple. Set was confused and didn't understand why Osiris laughed so much, until Set saw Nephthys on the side. She looked at him shyly, with a different emotion in her eyes. At this moment, Set understood why Osiris laughed so much, and he really wanted to call Osiris back. Brother Set, Nephthys said softly, the blue gold god Mo came to see me. Yeah. Set didn't know what to say, so he just hummed. Nephthys slowly approached Set. He expressed his love to me and wanted to marry me. Yeah, Set responded silently. He knew this because he was the one who told Isis that the blue gold god loved Nephthys. Seeing that Set looked normal, Nephthys bit her lip and said, I rejected Mo. Do you know why, Brother Set? I don't know. Set shook his head and said, by the way, there is something I want to ask you. What is it? Nephthys was stunned. Set put down the wooden cup and raised the corner of his mouth. Are you familiar with Best? I want to know what she likes and what she doesn't like. Hearing this, Nephthys had an unbelievable expression. Brother Set, do you love Best? Yes, Set admitted with a smile. Nephthys' eyes were filled with tears. She turned around hurriedly and said, I am so happy, Brother Seth. You have someone you like. I am so happy for you. Thank you, Seth said with a smile in his tone, and asked again, Nephthys, you haven't told me that you are familiar with Best? No. Nephthys shook her head with her back to Seth. I am not familiar with her. I am sorry that I can't help you. Brother Seth, don't feel guilty. Seth smiled and said, I think I will ask Best in person, and she should tell me. By the way, why did you reject the blue and gold god? Because I don't like him. Nephthys was silent for a moment and said, it doesn't matter, there are so many gods. Seth comforted Nephthys, find a god you like and who also likes you, and then conclude a marriage. Yeah, Nephthys responded in a low voice. Seth looked at Nephthys' slightly trembling back, and felt pity for Nephthys in his heart. But, compared to Nephthys, he trusted his own memory more. He didn't want to become Set, who raised the sun for Osiris in the myth, was defeated and died. Besides, It was true that he had merged the original Set's memories, but that was just a fusion of memories, and his emotions were the dominant force. Therefore, he would not love Nephthys like the original Set. As for Best, he would treat her to barbecue with double the spiciness the next time they met. Sighing silently, Set walked out of the temple and sat on a giant flower for a rest. In the temple, Nephthys was very puzzled. She didn't understand that before Set disappeared, Set's eyes were full of love for her. In just a few decades, Set's love disappeared. He even deliberately interrupted her words of love. Beth, is it because of Best? Nephthys frowned and whispered, if Set doesn't work, we can only change another god. When Osiris came back, he saw Set lying on a water lily outside the temple and Nephthys sitting inside the temple. With doubt, he walked to the giant flower of Set's water lily. Before he could speak, Set sat up, moved his nose, and looked at Osiris. Brother, did you accept the sacrifice? When I went there, the 300 slaves who were sacrificed had died. Osiris sighed. I accepted the sacrifice, and I can also give them some protection for their souls, lest their dead souls perish in the Styx. It should be rejected, brother. Set disagreed with Osiris's approach. Accepting sacrifices is equivalent to compromise. Since you want to sacrifice, you should strictly follow your rules, brother. Osiris patted Set on the shoulder and said, I have told them not to sacrifice anymore. Let's not talk about this. Didn't Nephthys say anything to you? Set shook his head. She didn't say anything, just said that she rejected the love of the blue and gold god. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, City of the Sun. Osiris looked at his brother speechlessly. My dear brother, do you really not understand what Nephthys wants to say? Set did not beat around the bush and said, I understand, but I no longer love Nephthys. Didn't Sister Isis tell you? Yes. Osiris sighed. I thought you would regret what you said. Besides, you also saw that Nephthys loves you. Set said seriously, one-sided love will eventually end. Maybe. Osiris sighed again. Poor Nephthys. Hearing his words, Set deliberately asked, will Sister be back soon? Yeah. Osiris nodded. Set did not ask again. He had already mentioned it. I hope that Osiris will not have anything with Nephthys. In fact, Set planned to leave the temple of Osiris. After all, Nephthys was there. Although he interrupted her expression of love, Set knew clearly what Nephthys wanted to say. Even if he didn't say it, it was still embarrassing. But he thought about it again. He went to the temple of Osiris just to prevent anything from happening between Osiris and Nephthys, although he wanted to warn Osiris in advance. But now the two gods were alone together, he still had to keep an eye on them. As for warning, he would find a chance later. For the next 10 days, Set almost stuck to Osiris, whether he was cultivating seeds or responding to sacrifices. Osiris was helpless. He put down the wheat ears in his hand and said, Dear brother, why didn't I feel that you were so attached to me before? I don't know. Set pretended to be stupid, and then changed the subject. Brother, why do you respond to human sacrifices? Humans have the custom of believing in gods and building statues and temples. Most of them are statues and temples of the supreme sun god. Other gods are basically invisible to humans. The gods live in the city of the sun and hardly come into contact with humans, unless it is related to their own authority. They will come into contact. Until 10,000 years ago, Raren left the city of the sun and built temples on the ground. Humans began to know about gods other than the sun god, and even began to believe in and worship them. The problem is that the blank power generated by human faith is poisonous to gods. Even the blank power of faith can create evil gods. As a result, most gods do not accept sacrifices, beliefs, and do not respond to humans' authority. Osiris picked up the wheat ears that fell on the ground. I am the god of agriculture and fertility. Agriculture and fertility all rely on humans. Protecting them is equivalent to developing my own authority. What about the blank power of faith? Set asked curiously. He had never accepted sacrifices. and those blank powers would disappear immediately after they were generated. I refused that power to merge into myself, and they fell into the statues in the temple. Osiris frowned, and they did not disappear. This time the gods' council is held. I plan to seek a solution from the god Ra, Seth hummed, thinking that he had fooled it, and left. Osiris smiled helplessly and continued to cultivate seeds. The next day, when the sun rose as usual, Isis returned. She looked tired, and there was an unpleasant fishy smell on her body, which was the smell of Apep. Osiris went over and supported Isis. "Little brother, little sister, you are all here." Isis smiled. "Stop talking, sister, take a rest," Nephthys said with a distressed look. Seth smiled at Isis and said, "Sister, take a rest." "Yeah." Isis smiled and was helped into the room of the temple by Osiris. In order to avoid embarrassment, Seth walked out of the temple and unconsciously looked at the red sun that had just risen. The sun rose as usual, which meant that Apep died again. After this meeting of the gods, "You should let me participate in the rotation again." Seth couldn't help but sigh. He didn't want to participate in the rotation, which meant facing Apep. Seth didn't think he could bear it after killing the original magic snake of Seth. "Forget it. Run when the situation is not good." Seth made a quick decision. After staying outside the temple for a long time, Seth heard Isis's voice and walked into the temple again. Isis smiled brightly, sweeping away the previous fatigue, and she said, "The gods' council will start tomorrow, and we should go to the city of the Sunday." Seth agreed with this decision. He wanted to see the city of the sun, the residence of the gods, with his own eyes. The most important thing is that he doesn't have to stare at Osiris. Isis took out her ankh and looked at Osiris. Osiris also took out his ankh. Then both of them injected divine power into the ankh at the same time. Receiving the divine power, the two ankhs floated in the air of the temple, emitting golden light. At the same time, golden divine patterns spread from the ankh to the void, and finally formed the shape of a door. Seeing this, Seth took out his ankh, injected divine power, and sent it into the air to be parallel to the ankhs of Isis and Osiris. Nephthys on the side did the same. The four ankhs were parallel, and divine power burst out. The illusory divine pattern finally became true. A huge golden gate made of pure gold, engraved with mountains, water, deserts, flowers, grass, trees, and people, stood in the air. Seeing this, Seth reached out to take back the ankh. Isis and the other two also took back the ankh. The golden gate split into two and slowly opened at the moment when ankh left. This is the sun gate that only God can open, leading to the sun city Heliopolis. After a while, the door was completely opened, and behind the door was a red sun. "Let's go." Isis smiled and took Osiris's hand and said. After that, they stepped into the door. Seth also stepped into the air and entered the sun gate. When passing through the red sun, Seth felt warm. Behind the red sun, Seth witnessed the miracle with his own eyes. A red sun hung high in the blue sky. The majestic city was built with white boulders, and the complex and huge sun god patterns were engraved on the city walls. On the left side of the city, there was a golden ocean with countless golden water lilies blooming. And on the right side of the city, there was a dense jungle that could not see the end. Behind the city, there is a void and chaos. In front of the city is a wide road with endless grasslands on both sides of the road. Although the memories have been integrated, it is still shocking to see it with one's own eyes. However, after being shocked, Seth's eyes were on dozens of gods other than them. Gods with three kinds of appearances: beast heads and human bodies, beast heads and beast bodies, and human heads and human bodies, are walking on the road to the city. Searching for the corresponding memories in his memory, Seth knows their names and powers. Speaking of which, he seems to be of the same kind as the beast-headed god. Seth suddenly thought of this, and immediately searched his integrated memories. TSK, he really is a beast-headed god. The human appearance is not his true appearance. Chapter 9 Son of God. Seth made up his mind to walk in human form from now on. "Seth, what's wrong with you?" Isis asked, looking at Seth, whose face changed again and again. Hearing this, Seth shook his head and changed the subject. "Nothing, I just thought of the sun wine." "Sun wine," Isis said helplessly, "unless another main god is born. Otherwise, you can't taste the sun wine." Today, There should be a son of God walking through the gate of God. Maybe there will be a god, or even a main god, Osiris said thoughtfully. Nephthys chuckled and said, Brother Osiris, none of the main gods today are born as sons of God. Yes, even the four of us ascended to the main god position as demigods. Isis continued. Seth didn't expect the topic to turn to the Son of God. After the gods left the Sun City, many gods combined with all things to give birth to the next batch of sons of God. The Son of God has extraordinary wisdom at birth and can live for 300 years. However, the Son of God will be in the form of a child throughout his life and will not grow up, unless they cross the gate of God standing in the city of the Sunday. Then the gate of God established by Ra will give them a kind of authority, making them lower gods. However, according to Seth's memory, in the 1,000 years of becoming a god, no son of God has become a god. Suddenly, the sun god pattern on the white city wall burst into golden light. One by one, golden falcons flew up from the city and cried loudly, A son of God has crossed the gate of God. Not far away, a god with a deer head and a human body saw this and shouted loudly. Seth looked at Osiris, who was a little confused. Brother, maybe you are right. Maybe a main god will really be born today. Osiris hesitated for a moment and said, No way. Go and see and you will know. Isis smiled. Then, they and other gods quickened their pace. In the city of the sun, the gods tacitly did not fly. Passing through the city gate, there are wide streets paved with huge stones and engraved with red sun god patterns. Along the road, there are temples of different appearances, a square temple built with white bones, a flower stand temple built with purple vines, a temple covered with grapevines. Each temple represents a god. Seth's eyes passed over the temples of different styles and fell on the temple floating in the center of the city. The huge stone stairs that descended in all directions connected to the earth. The stone pillars engraved with divine patterns supported the square dome. The stone walls behind the stone pillars were painted with portraits of gods. Over there was the Pantheon, where the gods' council was held. Under the Pantheon was the gate of God. Surrounding the gate of God were the temples of the main gods, followed by the upper gods and lower gods in order. When Seth and the other three arrived in front of the gate of God, hundreds of gods had already arrived. They stood in groups of 3 or 2 with familiar gods, and it was not crowded. Seth passed through the gods who were whispering about the new god and saw a tall stone arch engraved with golden sunflower patterns. And an extremely excited girl stood in front of the arch. She wore a red straw crown, a 4-color wedge on her neck, a white linen dress, and held a bronze ankh in her hand. It looks like the authority of some plant, Isis said. It looks like red moon grass. Osiris looked at the girl's crown carefully and said uncertainly. Upon hearing this, Nephthys wanted to say something, but a long white ostrich feather was inserted in her hair. A goddess with a righteous look in her eyes and wearing a pure white dress arrived. The eyes of the gods present could not help but turn to this god. It's Mot, Isis said. Seth felt a little strange when he saw Mot coming alone. Where is Thoth? He should be sticking to Mot all the time. As soon as the voice fell, a golden and green feather crown appeared. A wedge made of emerald, citrine, lapis lazuli and gold was worn on her neck. Gold rings engraved with holy texts were worn on her arms, wrists and ankles. The male god wearing a yellow, white and blue linen skirt walked quickly to Mot. Isis smiled and said, He's not coming. Osiris and Nephthys laughed at this. The main god Thoth, the god of wisdom, mathematics, and medicine, they have a really good relationship. They have been sticking together for millions of years without getting tired of each other. Seth sighed. After Thoth arrived, he said a few words to Mot, and then walked to the still excited girl. Lord Thoth. The girl restrained her expression and called respectfully. Yes. Thoth nodded slightly, then took out a piece of papyrus and a red pen, wrote on it and said, Sanglar, the son of the lower god Sekhem, crossing the gate of God at the age of 290, obtain the authority of the red moon grass and ascend to the lower god. After writing, Thoth told Sandlar, You already have a place in the Pantheon. Attend the gods' council convened by the god Ra tomorrow. Yes, Sandlar responded loudly. Then, Thoth and Mot left. The birth of a new god is recorded by the god of wisdom. It is a custom and also a recognition. Set remembered that Thoth had recorded all the things worth recording over the years since the creation of the world. He made them into books and stored them in his temple. With his consent, the gods could read them. It is indeed the red moon grass. Nephthys looked at Osiris with admiration. Brother Osiris, you are so amazing, because I am the god of plants. Osiris was embarrassed by the praise. Isis took Osiris' hand and smiled. That is also amazing. Set automatically ignored these meaningless words and focused his eyes on a little boy in front of the gate of God. He looked 11 or 12 years old, wearing a skirt, and had no divine aura. He was the son of God. He just noticed that, apart from Sandler who had become a god, he was the only son of God left. Set hoped that he could cross the gate of God. At this time, most of the gods had not left, and they all looked at the last son of God with curiosity. Isis and the other two also noticed him, without saying a word, and watched silently. For a time, this son of God received all the attention. He stood in front of the gate of God, took a deep breath, and raised his legs to cross the gate of God. However, Set did not see his legs appear on the other side of the gate of God. The last son of God seemed to have noticed it and tried to retreat, but he struggled for a moment and his body turned into ashes. What a pity! There is no chance of reincarnation. Isis had pity in her eyes. After the death of the son of God, he could not follow the Styx into the underworld and then reincarnate again. Dead is dead. Set wanted to say something, but his face was full of disgust when he saw the two gods in the distance. Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys saw the change in Set's expression and followed his line of sight. The faces of the three were instantly full of disgust. And the two gods also came in front of Set and the other four. The gods around them looked at the two gods in awe. My children, the mother goddess misses you very much. The goddess of the two gods smiled kindly. Chapter 10, Hateful Past. Hey, Isis sneered. Osiris had a mocking expression on his face, and Nephthys ignored the two gods. Set slightly restrained his subconscious expression and looked at the two gods in front of him. The goddess who was talking to them wore a sapphire crown, sky blue skin, and a blue dress woven with starlight. The main god Nut, the god of the sky, another male god, wearing a yellow sapphire crown, handsome face, and a sky blue skirt woven with starlight. The main god Keb, the god of the earth. They are the gods who gave birth to Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. According to his fused memory, the four gods hated Nut and Keb very much. If it weren't for Ra's prohibition of gods killing gods, and the power of the goddess of the sky and the god of the earth was second only to Ra, then the original Set and Isis would have planned to join forces to kill the goddess of the sky and the god of the earth. Nut did not change his face in the indifference and disgust of the four gods of Set. Keb looked sad. The other gods watched silently. They didn't dare to say anything. Although gods can't kill gods, they can be gods. Talking about them in front of the main gods is what stupid gods do. Talking about the main gods behind their backs is what smart gods should do. After the gods' meeting, let's have a good talk. Nut still smiled kindly. My dear children, don't forget your oath. After that, Nut and Keb, who looked sad, left. Set had shown disgust because of his body's instinct before, but now he really hated them. He hated being threatened the most. And then the threater took care of himself and left as a winner. Osiris put away the disgust on his face and said, let's go back to our temple and talk. Then, Set and the other four gods walked towards Osiris's temple. The other gods also scattered and left. The sons of gods who came have all walked through the gate of gods, and one lucky one has ascended to the throne. The goddess of the sky and the god of the earth found the god of the desert, the god of plants, the god of life, and the patron saint of the dead. If nothing unexpected happens, these two things will soon spread throughout the city of Heliopolis. In the temple of Osiris, which is a replica of the temple on earth, the four gods sat in silence around a round table cut from a giant tree. Set didn't know what to say, and he looked at it based on the fused memory. When Ra created the world, he took the god of air, Shu, who had already created it, and the gods of sky and earth, which were born from the union of Shu and the god of moisture, Tefnut, as the foundation. The earth is the base, and the air flows on the earth, and above the air is the sky. The creatures born at the beginning of creation live in the air, The existing gods also live in the world. The sky goddess and the earth god fell in love, and they united and gave birth to the stars. Gods combine with all things and give birth to the sons of gods. Gods combine with gods, and the ones born must be gods. But the stars are hanging high in the sky, but they are just glowing stones, without life or wisdom. They are not sons of gods, let alone gods. The sky goddess and the earth god were unwilling to believe it, and they were sure that the stars had life when they were just born. They went to pray to Ra to save the stars. Ra told them that the stars did not have life. At the same time, Ra forbade them to unite again. The endless approach of the sky and the earth would slowly drain the air, until the sky and the earth overlapped, killing all things living between the sky and the earth, and a large number of gods died because of losing their power. After being forbidden by Ra, the sky goddess and the earth god sought various methods. They wanted to give life to the stars and make them gods. But at that time, the god of life did not exist and could not do this. They prayed to Ra day and night to let them give birth to new offspring. Because the twisted tree spirit living in the twisted forest exhausted its long life to make a prophecy at the request of Nut, that is, the god of life will be born by her. Ra has always refused the sky goddess and the earth god to unite again, until 2,000 years ago. The god of wisdom Thoth persuaded Ra. Ra promised to give them 5 days to unite and let them give birth to new life. On the first day, Nut gave birth to Osiris. On the second day, Nut gave birth to Isis. On the third day, Nut gave birth to Set. On the fourth day, Nut gave birth to Nephthys. On the fifth day, Nut gave birth to the stars again, and used her divine power to assist the stars in absorbing the power of the 4 gods of Set. She tried to use the power of the 4 gods to force the stars to have life and ascend to the throne of God. 5 days later, Nut gave birth to the stars, but they still did not have life or wisdom. Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, who were born later, were deprived of their original power. They could not ascend to the throne of God and manifest their authority, and became demigods between God and the Son of God. Demigods do not have the power of God, and except that they will not die, they are no different from the Son of God. If that were the case, the original 4 gods of Set would not have the intention to kill them, but because the authority could not be manifested, Nut could not judge the authority of the 4 gods. Nut and Keb imprisoned the newly born 4 gods in the sky temple on the top of the mountain. They waited for the authority to manifest one day so that they could find the god of life. At the same time, the sky goddess and the earth god forced Set, Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys to swear an oath to Ra. They promised that if they were the gods of life, they would give life to the stars. After being imprisoned for 1,000 years, Ra convened a meeting of the gods and announced that Set and the 4 gods would be brought out. At the same time, Ra gave power to the 4 Sets, allowing them to manifest their authority and ascend to the rank of the main god, seizing divine power, imprisonment for 1,000 years, and forced oaths. This is why Set and the 4 planned to surround and kill the sky goddess and the earth god after they became gods. However, the power disparity was huge, and they had just ascended to the throne of God. They did not take action, and the sky goddess and the earth god did not come to them. According to the original plan, Osiris broke the silence and said, as for the original plan, Set remembered that they had discussed it for decades before finalizing it. First, Isis gave life to the stars. Then they killed the stars in front of the sky goddess and the earth god. Gods are prohibited from killing each other, but the stars that are given life are not gods. They killed the stars, and Ra would not ask. The most important thing is that they tried their best in exchange for the stars being given life. But in just a moment, the stars died in front of the goddess of the sky and the god of the earth. The taste was enough to drive the 2 gods crazy, and they would wail in pain for countless epochs to come. Nephthys was a little depressed and said, "Will they really go crazy over the death of the stars? I don't think they have family affection." Hearing this, Isis smiled. Whether they have it or not, the death of the stars will definitely make them sad. After all, they have waited too long for this matter. Set took over the conversation. He was not worried about what Nephthys was worried about. I hope they can bear it. Chapter 11. Moon Goddess Wine. After deciding to proceed according to the original plan, Set, who had planned to stroll around the city of the sun, lost his mood. He left the temple of Osiris and returned to his own temple, a temple built of yellow sand. As for knocking and staring at Osiris, Isis was beside Osiris and didn't need him. Yawning, Set leaned on the yellow sand throne and planned to take a nap. God doesn't care whether he sleeps or not, as long as he is not seriously injured or there is a problem with his authority. Sleeping is more for his own spiritual pleasure. What satisfies Set the most is that gods don't dream. Set stretched hard, and just as he was about to fall asleep, he sensed the arrival of an uninvited guest. What is she doing here? With doubts, Set released the divine power restriction at the entrance of the temple. A black cat wearing snake-shaped gold earrings walked in slowly with a smile. It was the cat god Best. "What's the matter?" Set asked curiously, holding his face. The black cat stopped and squatted not far from Set, saying, "I need your help with a little thing." Set said, "Oh," and then looked at Best. "What's in it for me?" Best swept his tail, and a pottery jar the size of a human head appeared on the floor tiles of the temple. "I heard from them that you wanted to drink sun wine." Hearing the word sun wine, Set became excited. "Do you have raw sun wine for me?" "No." Best shook his head. Instantly, Set was disappointed. Best shook his tail and said, "It's moonlight wine, which is second only to sun wine." "Moonlight wine?" Set looked puzzled. "It's the wine brewed by the moon god Khonsu." Best looked at the pottery jar reluctantly and said, "This is what Khonsu gave me before he fell asleep. Its taste is second only to sun wine, and it is also recognized." Moon god Khonsu. Set remembered that he suddenly fell asleep in the night plane 20,000 years ago. He never appeared in the sight of the gods again. Even when Ra convened the gods' meeting, Khonsu did not appear. So some gods speculated that Khonsu was dead. When a god dies, he will return to the power itself. After an era, the power will be re-embodied as a god with a true name. The premise is that the moon and night power that created the moon god Khonsu have not been controlled by any god at that time. In that case, it is equivalent to the resurrection of the old god. After considering for a moment, Set said, "I accept your reward. What do you want me to do for you?" Best did not answer immediately. An ankh appeared on her body, exuding a protective breath. This breath quickly spread throughout Set's temple. Set looked at Best quietly. He could sense that Best had no intention of fighting. "I hope that only you and I know about this." Best turned into a black cat with a serious expression. "I can guarantee that only you and I know." Set made a promise, and at the same time became more curious. Best nodded with satisfaction and said, "In the desert, there is a long bloody river. Its whereabouts are erratic, and it will even avoid gods and all living things. You are the god of the desert. It should not be difficult to find it and catch it." Seth thought while searching his fused memories. However, he did not find the memory of the long bloody river in the original Seth's memory. So it seems that the original Seth did not know the existence of the long bloody river. "I can't guarantee that I can find it and catch it," Seth told Best truthfully. The god of the desert knows everything about the desert, but the original Seth did not know, which can already explain the problem. "You can do it," Best said quite confidently. "It is just good at hiding its breath, but it can't leave the desert." "Okay, I will try to find it," Seth agreed, and asked again, "Can you tell me why you are looking for that river?" "No," Best refused flatly, then flicked his tail, put away the ankh and left the temple. Seth watched Best leave, and thought of how she often went to the oasis to trick humans into digging gold in the desert. Was she also looking for the bloody river? It was possible, but it was not appropriate to investigate it now. Seth brought the pottery jar left by Best to him and opened the lid. A refreshing smell floated out. With just one breath, Seth seemed to see a full moon in front of him. The silver moonlight was pouring into his body little by little. The slightly cold feeling was like moonlight. Seth put the lid of the pottery jar back on and put it away with a smile. "It is worthy of the wine brewed by the moon god." Good wine must be accompanied by food, and Seth suppressed his desire to drink now. It took some time to calm down, and Seth leaned on the throne and fell asleep. When Seth woke up, it was just the time when the red sun was rising. This meant that Ra had killed the demon snake Apep again. Seth changed into a blue, gold and white skirt, and the eagle-headed Wez. Then he left the temple and walked towards the Pantheon. At this moment, All the gods were walking towards the pantheon. After walking up the long stairs, Seth entered the pantheon. On the stone walls were paintings of Ra fighting the demon snake, the sun, the moon, animals, humans, mountains and rivers. Before the paintings, there were thrones arranged like a pyramid. At the bottom were a large number of lower gods and their thrones. Then came the upper gods, and then the main gods, and the throne of the only supreme god, which was higher than the main god. According to his memory, Seth walked in the air to the throne with a backrest engraved with desert patterns and sat down. Next to him were the thrones of Osiris, Isis and Nephthys. However, they had not arrived yet. Apart from him, only Sekhmet had arrived at the main god level. She had a lioness's head and a human body, and was dressed in a blood-red linen dress. On her arms, wrists and ankles, she wore gold rings engraved with corpses. The main god, Sekhmet, the god of revenge, fire and healing. Seth had no contact with Sekhmet. He glanced at her and sat on the throne waiting for the gods to gather. God of the desert, can I ask you a question? Sekhmet suddenly asked. Sure. Seth was bored and didn't mind chatting with people. Sekhmet's golden beast pupils were full of curiosity. How does it feel to be seriously injured by Apep? Hearing this, Seth raised his eyebrows. Is this a provocation? I don't mean to provoke you. Sekhmet realized that the words were wrong and hurriedly explained, I just want to know how it feels to be injured by the demon snake. Seth looked directly into Sekhmet's eyes, confirmed that she was indeed curious, not provocative. The power will be devoured bit by bit, and the proud triple authority will be as weak as a baby under the power of Apep. This is the real feeling that Seth got from the fusion of memories. Therefore, he was extremely unhappy about taking turns to assist Ra to kill Apep. Seth even thought about whether to tell Shu. After this serious injury and near-death experience, he suffered from Apep phobia. It is a mental illness that causes headaches and fever when seeing a demon snake. However, there is no such thing as mental illness in the world of God, so we can only let it go. Chapter 12, Resurrection of the Underworld. Sighing silently in his heart, Seth saw Sekhmet's face full of eagerness. Do you want to be hurt by Apep? Sekhmet showed his fangs and smiled. No, I want to fight Apep. I want to kill Apep myself. That feeling must be extremely refreshing. This answer made Seth not know how to continue the conversation, so he simply kept silent. However, he silently drew an equal sign with Sekhmet in his heart. On the other side of the equal sign were the 4 words strange god. After a while, Sekhmet suddenly spoke and said, Thank you for not laughing at me for overestimating my own abilities. Tefnut and Hathor always ask me if there is a problem with my authority, so I say such stupid things. Seth agreed with what Tefnut and Hathor said. Apep can fight with the supreme god, and fight for a whole night without wisdom and reason. It is enough to show how powerful Apep is. Such a powerful demon snake, their group of main gods are definitely not opponents. However, he will not laugh at Sekhmet. Wait until you can defeat the gods of the sky and the earth before you try to fight Apep. I'm trying. Sekhmet smiled and said. Sekhmet was too much, and the lioness smiled like a human, which was really creepy. Soon, Thoth and Mot arrived. Then came Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys. Then came Keb, Nut, and other upper and lower gods. The empty thrones welcomed their owners one by one. The gods chatted with each other, as if they were human markets. Seth felt very uncomfortable. The solemn temple where the gods held meetings should not feel like this. Although he was also chatting with Osiris and the others. At this time, the lively pantheon suddenly fell into a deathly silence. The gods unconsciously looked at the entrance of the pantheon, wearing a red sun disk on her head, with perfect facial features, perfect wes, and a perfect figure wearing a golden linen dress. It was the goddess of beauty Hathor, a goddess without any flaws. Seth was amazed at Hathor's beauty. Hathor walked to her throne expressionlessly and sat down. After a long while, the gods shifted their attention away from Hathor. She was like a walking sun, attracting people's attention unconsciously. This feeling reminded Seth of Hathor's origin, Ra's left eye. Speaking of which, I wonder if Osiris asked about Hathor's seed. Seth glanced at Osiris, who was joking with Isis. Nephthys did not join in the joking this time, but looked at Hathor with envy. Seth, who was standing aside, saw envy in Nephthys' eyes. Envy of Hathor's beauty? Seth guessed and stopped thinking about these insignificant things, because another god had arrived. It was the god he least wanted to see. Wearing a crown woven with golden feathers and a blue-green linen skirt, her deep eyes seemed to be able to see through all lies. On her neck was vest made of lapis lazuli, black crystal, silver and gold. On her arms, wrists and ankles were gold rings engraved with divine patterns. The main god Shu, the god of air, order, and wind. One of the first two gods created by the Supreme Sun God. He is responsible for convening the gods' council, resolving disputes among the gods, and maintaining order. He is also responsible for sorting out which two main gods should take turns every year to help Ra kill Apep. Beside him is a goddess who wears a crown of flying birds wrapped around snakes and a long white linen dress, as pure as rain. On her neck is vest made of sapphire, obsidian, red crystal, and gold. On her arms, wrists, and ankles are gold rings engraved with divine patterns. The main god Tefnut, the god of disorder, moisture, and rain. The two gods walked to their respective seats in the air and sat down, which was the position closest to Ra. Seth cast his eyes at the entrance of the pantheon in a daze, avoiding eye contact with Shu. It would be best if Shu forgot about him and did not re-include him in the rotation. I don't know if it was really as Seth thought. After Shu sat down, he chatted with Thoth, Mot and other gods. Seth was relieved that he was not mentioned, and then he saw the two annoying gods coming. Standing side by side at the entrance of the temple, the arrogant and powerful goddess of the sky and the god of the earth exuded the aura of the main god. The pantheon was once again in a dead silence. The gods' eyes turned back and forth between the goddess of the sky, the god of the earth, and the four gods of Set. For a moment, the atmosphere became more and more tense. "Take your seats. The meeting of the gods is about to begin," Thoth said, breaking the dead silence. Set retracted his gaze. Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys also stopped looking at them. The goddess of the sky and the god of the earth walked to the throne and sat down. At this point, except for the vacant thrones of the moon god and the sun god, all the gods had arrived. Thoth signaled the gods to wait quietly. After a solar hour, a round of sun penetrated the dome of the pantheon and fell on the vacant supreme throne of the temple, turning into a goddess. She wore a sun disk engraved with the sun god's pattern in red gold and wore a long skirt with a red sun pattern. Red is like the eyes of two red suns, which seem to be able to burn everything. On his neck is a red gold wezek engraved with the pattern of the sun god. In his right hand, he holds a red gold three-section staff, and in his left hand, he holds a red gold ankh. The supreme god Ra, the god of the Sunday. Thoth glanced at the gods and said loudly, "The gods' council begins." So far, the gods' council officially began. The gods were silent, all looking at Ra on the supreme god throne. The general gods' council is when there are disputes between gods. It is convened by Shu to deal with the problems between gods. At that time, the gods who are willing to participate can express their opinions. This time is different. It is convened by Ra himself, and the gods must listen first. Ra looked down at the gods and said, "The underworld is reviving, and it needs more dead souls. Among all things, the dead souls of humans are most suitable for the revival of the underworld." Mother Goddess Hathor suddenly spoke, interrupting Ra's words in disbelief. "Do we have to kill all humans to support the revival of the underworld?" Ra looked at Hathor and said, "Even if all existing humans die, the dead souls born are not enough to support the revival of the underworld. The world has been incomplete since its birth. The underworld, which has stopped growing, is now revived. It will grow into a state like the human world. Then the world will be truly complete. The gods of the underworld will also be born in the world. Therefore, the gods who built the temple, my children, protect humans, give them a stable and prosperous environment and increase their number." Seth felt something was wrong from these words. The desert is not suitable for human life. There is a lack of food and water, and there are many sandstorms, beasts, and monsters. If the number of humans is to be increased, the desert may have to be changed. The changed desert will naturally no longer be controlled by him, and his authority will be weakened. Seeing that Ra was no longer talking, Osiris said, "If we help humans, they will surely sacrifice to us. The blank power of faith is a dangerous existence for the gods. Even if we use divine power to isolate the blank power, it will still cling to the statues and will easily breed evil gods. Ra. How can we get rid of the blank power of faith? Chapter 13, Fulfilling the Promise. The gods were also concerned about the issue of faith. After all, the gods had basically killed the evil gods. They had also seen evil gods that were completely controlled by faith, and the gods did not want to become such gods. Ra slowly raised the red gold ankh in his hand, and golden feathers appeared out of thin air and fell in front of the gods. Seth picked up the golden feather on his leg, with a scorching temperature and the breath of the sun. Touch the golden feather with the statue of the god attached with the power of faith, and the golden feather will absorb the blank power generated by faith. Ra put down his hand and said, "Now the gods are relieved." After all, protecting humans is equivalent to accepting human sacrifices. The power of faith generated by this is too dangerous. Thoth put down the reed pen that recorded the content of the gods' meeting, waited for a while, and made sure that the gods had nothing to say. He looked at Ra on the supreme throne again. Ra did not speak again, but just looked down at the gods. The gods' meeting. End. Thoth said loudly. Then Ra turned into a red sun again, passed through the dome of the temple and left. After Ra left, the gods relaxed and discussed how to protect humans. Seth put away the feathers and began to worry that his authority might be weakened. He couldn't accept this. It was fine if he had never possessed such a powerful power. But if he had it and it was taken away, that wouldn't work. But the one who gave the order was Ra, and he couldn't beat him. After a moment of distress, Seth suddenly figured it out. He couldn't beat the supreme sun god, but he could basically beat other gods. After all, he was also the god of war and power. Whoever dared to change the desert should be prepared to be beaten by him. After figuring it out, Seth felt refreshed. Then Seth felt someone's eyes staring at him. Following the feeling, he saw Shu looking at him with a smile. "Little Seth, your injury is healed." It was not a question, but an affirmative sentence. Although Seth was a little disgusted with the title of Little Seth, Shu was his grandfather in terms of kinship. Wait, it seems that he is a grandfather, and also a grandfather-in-law. You should come back to take turns again. Shu smiled again. Unable to escape, Seth could only accept it. "Let me know when it's done." "Of course." Shu nodded with satisfaction. At this time, Nut spoke, her face full of expectation. "My children, it's time for us to talk." Tefnut looked at Nut coldly. "What do you want to talk to them about?" Nut did not answer, but just stared at Set, Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys, waiting for their reply. This attitude made Tefnut angry, and she shouted, "Nut, why don't you give up the stars?" Tefnut's voice made the gods look sideways, and they all looked at where the main gods were. Keb stood up and blocked Nut. "Mother Goddess, the stars are our children. We can't give up our children." Shu heard this and said, "What about these four? Aren't they your children?" Biased. Beth turned into a black cat and mocked. Matt looked at Keb and said, "You treat your children neither fairly nor justly." Set was happy to see Nut and Keb being criticized. To some extent, the words of Mott, Beth and other gods were far more important than the angry scolding of the four gods. Isis suddenly stood up and said with a mocking face, "We will fulfill what we promised, right now." As soon as this was said, Keb's face was full of disbelief. Nut on the throne quickly stood up, stood beside Keb, and stared at Isis. "Repeat what you said." "We will fulfill our promise, right now." Isis repeated the words with a mocking face. "Thank you, my dear child." Nut shed tears of excitement. Keb's face was also full of tears. Seeing this, Thoth looked at Isis. What promise? They were forced to make a promise, and the gods did not know it, so naturally they would not know the content of the oath. "If it hurts you, the promise can be broken." Shu frowned. "It won't hurt us, it's just a trivial matter." Osiris stood up, took Isis's hand, and smiled. "We have discussed this matter. Sister said that it is our unanimous decision." Set also stood up and said, "Yes." Nephthys nodded vigorously. Seeing the four gods of Set like this, Shu, Thoth and other gods could not say anything. "Let's go save your eldest brother now." Nut was extremely excited. "Wait!" Hathor suddenly shouted. The gods were very surprised. Why did Hathor call for a stop? Although Hathor had built a temple on the ground, She had almost stayed in the city of the sun for a long time. She would not participate in any disputes among gods. This was a common understanding among the gods. The entanglement between the goddess of the sky, the god of the earth and the god of the desert, the god of plants, the god of life, and the god of houses was also famous among the gods. Putting the two together, the gods were naturally surprised. Hathor ignored the eyes of the gods and took out a transparent long column crystal and handed it to Osiris. In the crystal were black seeds. "This is the new seed I cultivated. Please help humans so that they can use these seeds." It turned out to be seeds. The gods knew the reason, but they didn't know why. They were a little disappointed. They thought Hathor played a role in this dispute. Set was a little curious. Hathor seemed to have a special feeling for humans. In the meeting of the gods, Ra had not finished speaking. Hathor mistakenly thought that humans would be killed and interrupted Ra's words. And before, Nephthys was asked to send the newly cultivated barley seeds. Now the seeds are sent again, all for humans. But Hathor herself hardly leaves the city of the Sunday. "I will." Osiris took the seeds and smiled. Hathor showed a perfect smile. "Thank you." The upper gods and lower gods were fascinated by Hathor's smile, except for the 4 gods of Set who didn't understand, and the gods of the sky and the earth who didn't care. The other main gods had complicated expressions, but the most obvious expression was pity. Why pity Hathor? Set was curious and decided to ask best later. "Let's go," Nut urged. Hearing this, Set wanted to laugh. It was absurd to urge them to destroy the stars. However, Keb and Nut could not feel this absurdity for the time being. Seth suppressed the corners of his mouth that were about to curl up, followed Keb and Nut out of the pantheon with Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys. The upper gods and lower gods also left one after another. They watched the excitement and knew the oracle of the god Ra. It was time to act according to the oracle. The other main gods also left. Before leaving, Best looked at the empty throne of the moon god, and the cat's face was full of expectations. "Are you going to tease humans again?" Sekhmet said when he saw Best's smile. "It's not a tease, it's playing with them." Best snorted and ran away. Chapter 14, Empowerment Failure. Sekhmet walked out of the pantheon, looking at Set in the distance with fiery eyes. "God of strength and war, who is better than me?" Hearing this, several lower gods hurriedly quickened their pace and left. They knew Sekhmet's character too well. When he was eager to fight, he was very likely to drag them into a fight. As Keb and Nut left, Set, Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys did not speak. After leaving Heliopolis, Keb and Nut took out the Ankh and began to open the door to the temple. After the complex divine patterns formed the gate of God, Set and the other 4 also took out their Ankhs. Use the Ankh to inject power into the gate of God. If you want to go through the gate of God, you must contribute a bit of power. The gate of God opened smoothly. Keb and Nut looked at Set and the other 4, motioning them to go first. Isis sneered and walked into the gate of God side by side with Osiris. Set and Nephthys followed closely, followed by Keb and Nut. Passing through the gate of God, you will see a tall temple built with sky blue crystal. The sunlight shines through the crystal, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. This perfectly coincides with the temple in Set's fused memory. The original Set, Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys were imprisoned in this temple for 1,000 years as demigods. It was also in this temple that they swore an oath, promising to give life to the stars. How disgusting! Isis's face was full of disgust. Osiris held Isis's hand to calm her down. Nephthys looked at Set with tears in her beautiful eyes. Set ignored Nephthys. He didn't want to do something that would cause Nephthys to misunderstand. The opposite mood of Set and the other 4 was Nut and Keb. "Children, smile." Nut smiled brightly. "Your elder brother hasn't seen you for a long time. He must miss your smiles too." "I also miss the time when you and your elder brother listened to my stories together." Keb approached Nut and smiled. "That was a wonderful time." Set's mouth twitched. If he hadn't merged the original Set's memory, just looking at the sincere expressions of Keb and Nut, he might have really believed this nonsense. The actual situation is that they were forced to listen to some stories about the stars under the stars. No, it can't even be called a story. It's just that Nut and Keb shared interesting things such as how many times the stars flashed and whether the starlight was dimmer than yesterday. Torture. It's completely torture. But Keb and Nut don't think that they even chat with the stars. That look, as if the stars really have life and wisdom. Enough, take us to see the stars. Osiris frowned and interrupted the two people's memories. That's right. It's important to see your eldest brother. Nut was very excited and took the lead to walk out. Keb followed closely beside her, but the two never touched each other. Set breathed a sigh of relief, no longer being disgusted. Nephthys wiped away her tears. Isis took a deep breath and followed Keb and Nut. Osiris, Set and Nephthys followed closely. Outside the temple was a flat land full of sky-blue flowers, the white sea of clouds, the clear sky that seemed to be within reach, and the sky-blue sea of flowers representing love. This is the full view outside the temple. The sky and the earth are forbidden to contact. Keb, the god of the earth, built this sky temple on the highest mountain in the world. Set picked a blue bud casually, which is the sky flower. Keb cultivated a special flower for Nut to represent their love. Putting aside Keb and Nut, Set likes the fragrance of this flower. In the distance, Nut stood in the sea of flowers, emitting a soft sky-blue light. The divine power of the sky slowly permeated the mountaintop. The clear sky became turbid, as if covered by a layer of fog. Gradually, the fog became thicker and the sky became more turbid. Suddenly, Nut raised her hand and gently made a grabbing motion. A piece of sky-blue cloth covered with fog patterns fell from the sky and landed in Nut's hands. As the cloth fell, the sky became clear again. Not only that, stars emitting silver light appeared under the sky. Obviously, Nut had covered the stars before. Keb looked at the stars gently and said, "Meets, your brother and sister are back." After a pause, Keb looked at Set and the other four. "Your eldest brother said he missed you very much. He also asked you if the name Meets I gave you is nice." Set watched Keb go crazy quietly. Osiris had a blank expression on his face, and Nephthys turned his head away. Isis looked up at the stars under the sky. After a moment, Isis retracted her gaze. She was overthinking. The stars were just glowing stones, without life, wisdom, or divine power. If the stars were to embody gods, then they must have a breath of life. Just now, she actually wondered for a moment whether the stars could really talk to Keb and Nut. "Keep your promise." Nut stared at Isis expectantly. Isis glanced at her and walked step by step to a place where one hand could touch the sky. Then she took out her own ankh and held it in her hand. The green divine power of life flowed out of her body and attached to the stars. Set felt Isis's huge and powerful divine power and could only sigh that she was worthy of the authority of life. To be fair, the authority of life was stronger than his authority of desert. After all, the desert only accounted for 80% of the entire land, and it was still covering the land. Life was different. Whether it was desert, grassland, forest, swamp, or even the city of the sun Heliopolis, there were gods, people, and all things with life. As Isis's power radiated, a transparent green water lily of divine power appeared on the stars visible to the naked eye. As time passed, the stars were slowly and completely covered by the transparent water lily of divine power. Isis let go of the ankh in her hand and let it float in the air. She swept her eyes over the stars and spoke loudly. "With Meets as your true name and the stars as your foundation, be born." Boom. A deafening explosion sounded. The chaotic divine power of life dissipated in the air. Set frowned and looked at the bright moon in front of Isis, which was as tall as a person. "Is that the power of the moon god?" ? The next moment, the moon disappeared. The stars shone with pure starlight. Osiris flashed to Isis' side and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Isis hummed and looked at Nut. "Did you make a deal with the moon god?" "The stars are protected by the moon god's powerful power. I can't bless the life force. It is impossible to attach the source of life to make the stars have life." Nut's expression was distorted, staring at Isis. "What did you say?" "Nut, calm down." Keb walked up to Nut and looked her straight in the eyes to comfort her. Isis took back the ankh and returned to the ground with Osiris to wait for a reply. Set walked over and asked, "Sister, are you okay?" Nephthys also said, "Sister, are you okay?" "No problem." Isis shook her head and said, "If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15. Ammon. Keb patiently appeased Nut and turned to Isis for confirmation. Only when the power of the moon god disappears can Meteus be given life? Isis nodded slightly. The moon god blesses the stars. Let the stars remain eternal and twinkle. Giving life to the stars is an act that makes the stars change. So, the power of the moon god erupted and expelled my divine power. I believe you know better than me how powerful the moon god is. I can't resist his power. This made Keb fall silent. Seth was wondering if Isis was lying, but on second thought, Isis didn't have to lie. They had already decided what to do about giving life to the stars. There was no need to change their plan temporarily and add trouble. So, it was indeed the power of the moon god that expelled the power of Isis. Even in sleep, can the remaining power still expel the power of a main god? Seth had a specific understanding of the power of this moon god, and was also a little curious. How could such a powerful god suddenly fall asleep? What deal did you make with the moon god? Osiris repeated Isis's question. Nut was almost collapsed at this moment, and obviously could not answer this question. Keb's face was full of bitterness, and he said, "No deal. It was me and your mother goddess who asked the moon god to bless meats. Stars are just an ordinary thing in the world. They will collapse little by little as time goes by. Besides, the night is the sign of Apep's arrival. The battle where Ra killed Apep took place under the sky. Meats was sometimes affected by the residual power. So, we asked the moon god for help. He gave the stars the power of the moon in the night. From then on, the stars can shine and remain unchanged forever. It's just that I didn't expect that the blessing I asked for would hinder Meats from having a life." Isis said without emotion. "We have fulfilled our promise. What the result is has nothing to do with us. Let's go. We should go back to the temple." Seth and the other two would naturally not disagree, although this matter was different from their original plan. However, the results were similar. They saw the collapse and pain of Keb and Nut. Moreover, there was no need to fight them. At this time, Nut suddenly bypassed Keb and angrily blocked the four of Seth. "Meats has not yet gained life, and you have not fulfilled your oath." Isis sneered. "So you want me to continue to give life to the stars? If you want, I can do that. I also want to know whether the stars cannot be turned into powder in the confrontation between the power of the moon and me." Nut's expression became even more angry. "Meats is your elder brother. How dare you say that?" Seth looked at the stars under the sky. Although they were born from the same belly, however, Seth thought that the stars were his elder brother. Osiris protected Isis and said, "Let's solve the blessing of the moon first." After that, Osiris took Isis and took care of Seth and Nephthys and left. Seeing this, Nut still wanted to stop them, but Keb stopped her. The four gods of Set each summoned their servants and left the top of the mountain. The reason why they didn't leave through the God's Gate was that they were afraid of being attacked. After all, it takes a certain amount of time to open the God's Gate. After the four gods left, Nut looked at Keb with tears in his eyes. "Khonsu is still sleeping in the temple. We can't get into the temple even if we join forces, let alone wake him up." Keb couldn't touch Nut, so he could only comfort her with words. "Khonsu will wake up. Don't worry. Listen, Meats is also comforting you." Nut wiped the tears from her eyes and looked up at the stars gently. "Mother Goddess, don't cry. Meats is good." Seeing this, Keb also smiled. Suddenly, Keb looked at the stars in surprise, and he heard the stars say, "Father God, Mother Goddess, there is a god who said that he can wake up the moon god." "Really? What god is it?" Keb asked hurriedly. Nut was also very anxious, and she also heard this. "He didn't tell me what god he is," Xingqian said. "He said his name is Ammon and he lives at the source of the Nile. Only on the 4th day of every solar month, when Ra patrols the underworld, will he appear." Keb and Nut listened. They had never heard of a god named Ammon. The two gods looked at each other at the same time and wanted to ask each other if they knew the name Ammon. "Father God, Mother God, no." Xingqian loudly dissuaded him. "You can't say his name. You must wait until the 4th day of every solar month, when Ra patrols the underworld. You can only call out his name at the source of the Nile. He can awaken the moon god and let the moon god withdraw his blessing." Keb and Nut nodded repeatedly, their faces full of excitement and excitement. Ra, Father God, and Mother God, did not help them save Xinqian. The gift of the God of Life also failed. But, they still have a chance. A plain far away from the top of the mountain, Set, Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys had just finished their discussion. The discussion was about giving life to the stars. This change was beyond their expectations. After all, they didn't know that the moon god actually protected the stars. However, the god of life is Isis. If the stars want to have life, they still need the authority of Isis. At that time, they will still follow the original plan, give the stars life in front of Keb and Nut, and then kill the stars. Give this pair of strange gods a long-term pain. The pain they just showed is at most interest. Wait for the day when the moon god wakes up. Isis smiled. I hope that day will come as soon as possible, Nephthys said gently. Osiris held Isis's hand and said, barley wine and wine always need time to ferment. Wine tastes better after waiting. Seth thought of the reward he received, the moonlight wine brewed by the moon god. It was indeed delicious, but he had to wait for him to find suitable side dishes. Then he would find Osiris, Isis, and Nephthys to taste it together. Seth, what are you daydreaming about? Isis said helplessly. No. Seth smiled and changed the subject skillfully. Sister, I'm thinking about protecting humans. Monsters in the desert won't attack temples and oases, Isis said. You're already protecting them. Don't worry. Yeah, Seth responded. He didn't worry about how to protect humans. What really worried him was how hard he should fight the gods who dared to change the desert landscape. Forget it. It depends on the situation. He would hit those who deserved a beating harder, and those who were smart would be lighter. However, smart gods wouldn't fall into his hands. Chapter 16 Desert Sight. After that, the four gods chatted for a while, then opened the gates and returned to their respective temples. Set did not return to the temple where he woke up at first. That temple was located deep in the desert and was too desolate. He returned to the temple where Set used to stay. There were several oases thousands of miles away from this temple, where many humans lived. However, the humans in the oases had nothing to do with him. As Isis said, the monsters in the desert only followed their instincts and could avoid the oases. It was Set's large-scale killing that made the monsters add an instinct to avoid the oases. The original reason for Set's killing was just because he was in a bad mood that day. In short, he has blessed mankind. He will not invest energy in this matter anymore. Enjoying the beautiful daily life of God is what he should do most. Sitting on the throne, Set wanted to rest for a while, but he thought of Best's matter. The reward has been received, and he should help find the river. Rest or find the river? After thinking for a while, Set decided to find the river, because he was also curious, what did Bester do with that river, and what secrets were hidden in the river? After making the decision, Set stood up and took out the ankh. Golden light emanated from the ankh, covering the entire temple. Set closed his eyes and called his true name in his heart. Every god has a true name, and the true name is the most fundamental power. The true name is also a part of the embodiment of authority. Therefore, knowing the true name of God, you can use the true name to drive the corresponding authority. Therefore, every god will hide the true name in his heart, and only he knows it. As Set called, he could clearly feel that there was a war going on there, and there were people there who were thirsting for power. And every move of the people, animals, monsters, and gods in the desert. However, this was not enough. Set ignored other wars, power and authority, and focused all his energy on the authority of the desert. In an instant, Set felt that his perspective had changed. He could see his temple standing in the desert, from the perspective of the desert. Not only that, he could not only see the temple, the sand and dead grass around the temple. Everything can be seen, even farther and farther. For example, he is like a spring, constantly gushing out water. Wherever the water spreads, it is within his sight. Supported by the huge divine power of the three powers, this omniscient perspective and perception fascinates Set, because everything is under his control. However, Set still remembers what he wants to do, to find the bloody river that Bester mentioned. At this time, his sight has spread to thousands of miles beyond the temple. There is an oasis here, which has just experienced a war. All you can see are corpses, human remains, half-burned wooden houses, and blackened stone houses. The water source in the oasis soaks a pile of corpses, and it is also the color of blood. This oasis is abandoned, and vultures and wild beasts will come one after another. Then there will be plague, and then the yellow sand will swallow everything. Such sight continues to spread. A caravan of 100 people riding camels is walking in the desert. Full bags are hung on the camels. What caught Seth's attention was a small statue in the middle of the caravan. It was held by a girl in a white robe with a sea buckthorn pattern on her forehead. It was the statue of the sea buckthorn god Logos, who was a lower-level god. The one holding the statue should be Logos's priest. Monsters in the desert do not attack oases or temples. However, monsters will not avoid caravans walking around in the desert. Most caravans will seek the protection of a god, that is, sacrifice to a god. In exchange, they will get a statue with the breath of a god. The monsters sensed the breath of the god and dared not approach. To the south of this caravan, Seth saw a monster that made him stop for a moment. It had a lion's body, but a human head and a pair of white wings. This monster reminded Seth of the Sphinx, the monster that liked to ask riddles. Unfortunately, it was only a resemblance in appearance. The Sphinx had the wisdom to talk to humans. The monsters in the desert that were polluted by Apep only had instincts and would only follow their instincts. Even the god of wisdom, Thoth, wanted to give the monsters wisdom. The monsters will also return to their original state of survival by bloodthirsty instincts in the next moment. This also dispelled Seth's idea of raising a sphinx. To the north of the sphinx, Seth saw a dozen people digging holes in the desert. While digging, they compared the crude map. Seeing the familiar notes and secular characters on the map, Seth knew that they were humans deceived by Best. In the opposite direction of their digging, Seth saw Best. This time, she turned into an old woman with gold ornaments all over her body. In addition, she also made a fake human. Looking at the appearance and demeanor, there is a sense of Hathor. Whoever finds the buried golden cup, my granddaughter and property will be given to the person, Best said to the dozens of people around her. While she was talking, she glanced at the yellow sand on the ground. Seth didn't care. He didn't hide his state, so the gods would naturally find it. The sight continued to spread. Oases, caravans, monsters, all kinds of people, animals, monsters, and gods were watched by Seth. The sun set, darkness fell, the new moon was high, and the stars twinkled. Seth's sight was still spreading, until Apep died and the red sun rose. The new moon and the stars disappeared, but Seth's sight was still spreading. The sun and the moon rotated, and Seth was too lazy to remember which day it was. He only knew that his sight was still spreading. He could see everything that happened in the desert at all times. However, he still couldn't find the river that Bester said. The blood-red river that would avoid living life and gods. Does it really exist? Seth couldn't help but think so. But Bester had no reason to lie to him. When she asked him for help, she was very sincere. Crash! Suddenly, Seth heard the sound of flowing water. Is there a tributary of the Nile nearby? Seth subconsciously thought so and looked around. The red sun rose, and the coldness of the night slowly dissipated. A gust of wind blew, rolling up the yellow sand and falling aside. There is no oasis, no water source, and no river. There is only yellow sand here, endless yellow sand. Did he hear it wrong? Seth suspected that he had heard it wrong. But the next moment he rejected this suspicion. Although he is a little tired now, God will not have auditory hallucinations. Splash! Suddenly, Seth heard the sound of flowing river again. Looking in the direction of the sound, a river as thick as an arm was flowing quietly in the distance. The river water was as red as blood. It was the bloody river mentioned by Best. Seth became excited and looked over quickly. Then, Seth watched the river water as thick as an arm fly away, leaving only a dent in the original place. Not only that, while flowing, the river water was rapidly becoming wider. It seems that this river has no source. Chapter 17 The Long River's Prophecy. Rather than saying it is a river, it is better to say it is a living creature that can move. But in the blood river, Seth did not sense any signs of life. This made Seth more curious. According to his fused memories, all the rivers, lakes and rivers on earth all came from the Nile River. The predecessor of the Nile River was the Great Flood, and Apep jumped out of the Great Flood with darkness, death and chaos. The great flood poured on the earth and became the Nile River. Countless lives exist because of the Nile River. However, since the beginning of creation, the Nile River has not materialized its own gods. Even the tributaries and lakes have no gods born. The gate of God set up by Ra did not give any son of God such authority. Therefore, there can be no life in the river. Set's consciousness flowed all the way to the distance with the long river of blood. However, after a few breaths, the blood-colored river could not see the border, nor the upstream and downstream. The blood color of the long river became more and more intense, making Seth feel a little sick. Suddenly, the blood-colored river stopped beside a sand dune and did not move. Seth was cautious and did not approach immediately. He observed the bloody river and even used his divine power to investigate. The only feedback he got was that it was just an ordinary river. There was no breath of life or divine power, but he saw the river come into being from nothing and become so wide that he could not see the edge. He did not believe that this was an ordinary river. Seth used a wisp of consciousness to control the desert in the distance. After a while, a desert wolf howled and was rolled into the bloody river by the yellow sand. Awoo! The desert wolf called frantically and swam to the shore with its limbs. Seth watched quietly and did not stop it. After a long time, the desert wolf crawled out of the bloody river. It stared at the desert that trolled it in horror. It bared its teeth and wailed a few times before running away. Seth, who was standing by, had already used his divine power to check the desert wolf. It did not change at all. It was still the desert wolf. Is the bloody river not dangerous? Thinking about it, Seth decided to catch it first. When Seth mobilized his divine power, the bloody river suddenly shrank rapidly. Upstream, downstream, and the other side of the river, all were seen. Seeing this, Seth hurriedly rushed to the bloody river with the desert wrapped in his divine power, trying to trap it. However, the moment Seth's divine power touched the bloody river, a golden sun appeared in front of him. The breath of the sun also filled his perception. Before Seth could perceive it carefully, the golden sun twisted and disappeared like a phantom in the water. All Seth saw at this moment was the concave endless desert. The bloody river disappeared. After searching around the sand dunes, Seth had to accept this result. Compared with the frustration of being run away by a river, Seth cared more about the golden sun. The sun represents the supreme god Ra, and it is also the authority of the supreme god Ra. However, the breath of the sun he sensed was completely different from the breath of the son of Ra. It was Ra's divine blood that healed the wound caused by Apep. Seth could be sure that his perception was correct. Thinking about the bloody river, Seth did not spread himself like water. After a while, Seth gave up thinking about the blood river. He knew too little about that river to know what it was. It seemed that he could only start from best. After taking another look at the huge pit left by the disappearance of the blood river, Seth gathered all his consciousness. After some time, Seth opened his eyes. The murals depicting the yellow sand swallowing monsters and human sacrifices came into view. It was the mural of his temple. Seth let out a long breath and fell on the throne. Even with the three powers providing almost unlimited divine power, Seth felt mentally exhausted. Rubbing his temple, Seth noticed a letter outside the temple. He drove the ankh to put the letter in, and a gust of wind blew in front of Seth. He touched the breeze. The wind instantly disintegrated into a series of holy book texts. After a rough look, it was Shu's letter. It explained two things. One was that the rotation order had been rearranged. After this solar year ended, Seth and Best would take turns for the next solar year. Another thing is about Keb, Nut, and the stars. Although Shu is not clear about the promise Seth and the others made at the beginning, however, what Keb Nut did was for the stars to have life, so it is obvious what this promise is. So many days have passed, and the stars are still stars. Shu wants to know what will happen after the divine meeting. After thinking about it, Seth raised his hand and wrote a series of holy book words. The content is that he saw the rotation order and the failure of giving life to the stars. Seth did not say the specific process. The holy book words turned into a palm-sized yellow sand bird and left the temple. Seth yawned, left the throne, and walked to the room inside the temple, where there was a bed. The throne can take a nap, but if you really want to recover your tired spirit, you still need a bed. Lying on the soft bed, Seth closed his eyes and fell asleep. After an unknown period of time, Seth heard the sound of flowing river water. Where did the river come from in the desert? Feeling something was wrong, Seth opened his eyes. I saw a golden sun hanging high in the sky. A blood-red river with no visible legend, no visible upstream or downstream was flowing by the side. Seth's face changed, and he mobilized his own divine power to break the illusion. He was clearly sleeping in the temple, and there was no way he could run to the river, or it was next to the blood-red river that escaped from his hands. Then there was only one explanation. This was an illusion. However, Seth's face changed soon, and he could not sense the existence of divine power. A series of changes made Seth particularly annoyed. "Hello, young god." Suddenly, a heavy voice came to Seth's ears. He looked around and did not see anyone. The river was empty, with only him. "It's me, the long river in front of you." The heavy voice spoke again. Seth cast his eyes on the blood-red river and asked tentatively, "What on earth are you? Are you a monster or an evil god?" "Neither, I'm just a river," the heavy voice denied, saying, "I came to you to tell you my prophecy." "Prophecy?" Seth frowned. "Yes," the heavy voice said complacently, "my predictions are extremely accurate. It never goes wrong and will definitely come true." Seth half believed and half doubted. "Then what is your prediction for me?" The heavy voice sighed and said, "Your future is not good. You will be killed by your nephew, and all your power will be taken away, and the last possibility of resurrection will be wiped out." Hearing this, Seth was shocked. He avoided Nephthys because Nephthys was the fuse for his quarrel with Isis and Osiris. In addition, what Nephthys did in mythology was really bad, so he didn't dare to gamble and could only avoid Nephthys himself. Chapter 18 Hathor's request. In theory, avoid the fuse. Even if Nephthys really hooked up with Osiris, Seth was an outsider. How to deal with this matter is the business of Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys. In short, he, an outsider, could not repeat the ending of death. After thinking this through, Seth breathed a sigh of relief. "It seems that you are sure to avoid your nephew killing you." The heavy voice laughed. Seth subconsciously wanted to explain the reason, but he realized that this subconscious was wrong. He was not a big mouth, and it was impossible to get an answer from him just by asking. "I have heard your prophecy. Let me go." Skillfully, Seth began to change the subject. "I have never prevented you from leaving." The heavy voice laughed. "At the same time, I also want to tell you, the result of the prophecy is not unchangeable. As long as you kill the father and mother gods of your nephew, then if you kill you and seize the power, the nephew will never appear again." "Well," Seth responded with a strange look. The next moment, the golden sun hanging high in the sky burst into dazzling light. Seth was a god, but he couldn't bear it either. He could only bow his head and close his eyes. After a while, the light faded and Seth opened his eyes. The room engraved with desert patterns and yellow sand divine patterns came into view. Seth sat up and looked around the room. Everything was quiet, and the protection formed by the Ankh was still intact. All this showed that Seth had not left the temple. Nothing had entered the temple either. But he remembered everything he had just seen and heard clearly. It was not a false memory, nor was it an illusion, let alone a dream. Gods don't dream. Was there something done to him when he touched the bloody river? Thinking of this, Seth called out his true name in his heart. The divine power brought by the triple authority kept washing his divine body. This process lasted for thousands of times before Seth stopped. During the washing process, Seth didn't feel anything unusual. There are two possibilities. One is that his guess is wrong. The other is that there is a problem with his body that he can't find. After a moment of contemplation, Seth decided to go back to Heliopolis. Any evil power cannot exist in Heliopolis. Getting up from the bed, Seth walked quickly to the hall. Ankh floated quietly in the air, exuding the breath of the desert. Seth waved to Ankh. It slowly floated into Seth's hands. After injecting his own divine power, Seth began to open the gate leading to Heliopolis. While opening the gate of God, Seth also wanted to think about the way to deal with the prophecy of the blood river. He could feel a strong malice. Just like the widely circulated fable Oedipus Rex, God made a prophecy to the king and told him what would happen in the future. The king believed in God's words and abandoned his son. In the end, the son killed his father and welcomed his mother. If the king had not abandoned his son, the result would not be a tragedy. God made a prophecy and made things happen according to the future he predicted. The blood river is that God, and Seth is the king. It's a pity that fables are fables after all, and Seth is not stupid. In addition, he was more concerned about what exactly that bloody river was. While he was thinking, the gate of God opened, revealing the sun behind the gate. Seth put away the ankh and stepped through the gate of God. He saw the city of Heliopolis again. However, it was different from the last time he came. There was no God on the road to the city. Seth did not sigh too much, but opened his hands and faced the red sun above the city of Heliopolis. The sun with the breath of Ra shone. Suddenly, Seth felt his body lighten. What was being stripped from his body? Before Seth could find that thing, he heard a shrill scream. Then there was a strong smell of blood. He still didn't know what it was, but he was sure that the dirt attached to his body was gone. After solving this matter, Seth planned to return to the temple immediately and write a letter to Best. Finding the bloody river was what she asked him to do. Best must know something about that unfortunate river. However, when Seth took out the ankh, he saw Hathor. As soon as she walked out of the city, she saw Seth, who was also surprised. After smiling at Hathor, Seth was about to open the god's gate and leave. Wait a minute, Hathor suddenly shouted at Seth. Seth couldn't pretend not to hear, and it would take time to open the god's gate, so he stood there, waiting for Hathor to come. After a while, Hathor came over with a smile on her face. Seth, can I ask you to do something for me? What is it? Seth wanted to sigh. He was not a helpful god. Just as he was about to say something, Hathor's expression became serious. Her nose moved, and she looked at Seth and said, "Did you accept human blood sacrifices?" Blood sacrifices? Seth was confused. I didn't accept human sacrifices, but you have a very strong smell of human blood. Hathor looked suspicious. Seth didn't know how to prove that he had not accepted sacrifices, so he could only reiterate, I didn't accept human sacrifices. Hathor approached Seth, sniffed hard, and then said, I misunderstood you. In addition to the smell of blood, there is also the power of the evil god. The evil god accepted human blood sacrifices. You killed it, and its breath stained you. Seth was still confused. Evil god? He hadn't killed any evil gods recently, so how could he be stained with the breath of evil gods? Wait, a long bloody river. Could that long bloody river be the evil god? When Seth thought of this, he felt that there was something wrong with Best, but he didn't show it. Just said, is there anything I can help you with? Hathor took out a piece of transparent crystal, which was full of seeds. Seth did not have agricultural authority, so naturally he didn't know what these seeds were, but looking at its appearance, it should be exactly the same as the one Hathor gave to Osiris before. Can you help me give the seeds to Osiris? Hathor asked. Okay. Seth nodded. Thank you. Hathor smiled on her perfect face. Seth found it pleasing to the eye, although he didn't know why Hathor didn't go by herself. But compared to this, Seth wanted to know why Hathor took special care of humans. Logically, her authority should not rely on the strength of humans. He asked the question in his heart. Hathor put away her smile, looked bitter, and said, because they are my children. For my own children, I always can't help but worry about and help them. Children? Seth raised his eyebrows. What is the relationship between humans and Hathor? Just when Seth wanted to continue asking, Hathor said, go find Thoth, he will tell you. After that, Hathor returned the same way. Chapter 19 Blood Sacrifice. After collecting the seeds, Seth reopened the gate of God. However, he did not return to the temple where he stayed before. He could not guarantee that there were no pollutants from the bloody river in the temple. He had not yet figured out the strange power of the river. When he figured it out, he would let it know what the desert god's punishment was. Arriving at another temple, Seth sat on the throne and sent a letter to Best. He told her that he had found the bloody river and asked her to come find him. Then, Seth sent a letter to Thoth, the god of wisdom. He wanted to know what the relationship between Hathor and humans was. Logically, the world and everything in it were created by Ra. Humans are no exception. Why did Hathor say that humans are her children? This doubt can only be answered by Thoth. After writing the letter, Seth thought about it with Hathor's crystal and said, Ago, the giant yellow sand bird, which was previously given a real name and condensed by Seth's divine power, quickly flew into the temple. It landed respectfully on the floor tiles of the temple engraved with divine patterns. Master, Seth put the crystal into its body and attached a divine power protection. "Go find Osiris and tell him that Hathor sent it." "Yes," the yellow sand bird responded and flew out of the temple. After dealing with these things, Seth was just about to engrave the divine pattern on the temple wall again. He sensed that a team of 300 people was rushing to the temple 100 miles away. This temple is relatively remote and there is no oasis nearby. Their goal can only be the temple. It's really strange. How do they know that there is a god in the temple here? The original Seth noticed this, but didn't explore the reason. Because he would not accept sacrifices. Whether humans come or not is the same result. After thinking about it, Seth decided to accept the sacrifice. He wanted to study the blank power generated by faith. With the golden feather given by Ra, he was not afraid of losing control of his research. After making the decision, Seth rebuilt the temple. The huge stone pillars engraved with complex lotus patterns, the walls and domes painted with yellow sandstorms and desert sunsets. Inside the temple, there are ponds filled with golden water lilies on both sides. There is also a tall statue made of sand condensed by divine power. With the support of Seth's powerful divine power, the new temple was built in a few breaths. Seth took out the golden feather given by Ra, and the breath of the sun filled the entire temple. After placing the golden feather inside the statue, Seth sat on the throne and waited for the arrival of the sacrificial team. After a solar day, Seth was a little bored. He forgot that the humans who came to sacrifice were basically on foot, in order to show their piety. After all, most gods do not accept sacrifices. However, the gods already knew Ra's oracle. The gods will not refuse the request of humans to sacrifice. Humans will soon know this. Yawning, Seth took a nap. Another solar day passed, and the team arrived outside the temple. Seth sat on the throne in front of the statue. Not long after, an old man wearing a white robe, with gray hair and a golden ring on his wrist led the way. Following behind were 6 children aged 11 or 12 dressed like the old man, 3 boys and 3 girls. After that, there were 10 strong young men wearing simple obsidian armor. Behind them, there were 100 ragged men and women lined up in an orderly manner. At the end of the team, there were 20 strong young men also wearing simple obsidian armor. The rest of the people were waiting outside the temple. The old man in the lead bowed his head and walked to a place not far from the throne and stopped, then raised his arms and raised his palms. The people behind him repeated the old man's action. God cannot be looked directly at, and disrespect will bring divine punishment. Great God, please forgive us for disturbing you, the old man said respectfully. I forgive you, Seth said indifferently. The old man was relieved. This God did not let them leave, and it seemed that there was hope that they would agree to their sacrifice. Great God, we are humans living in the water and grass oasis. Because we are weak and confused, we want to ask for you to offer us sacrifices. These 100 slaves are sacrifices. Please accept them. Weak? Seth raised his eyebrows. He had previously merged with the desert and had a clear understanding of the humans in the oasis. A truly weak oasis would only be plundered and killed by a powerful oasis nearby. Most importantly, they believed that blood sacrifice of living people could gain the blessing of God. Therefore, they were not weak to come here and offer 100 slaves for blood sacrifice. Naturally, Seth did not expose it, because it had nothing to do with him. Okay, Seth replied. The old man was stunned for a moment when he heard Seth's straightforward answer, and then he was ecstatic. He did not expect that the god agreed so readily. Praise you. Please tell me your god's name, the old man said excitedly. The god of the desert, Seth said lightly. When these words came out, the old man and the people behind him were stunned. The god of the desert? ! They are not stupid, nor are they foolish. Naturally, they know that there are also differences between gods. After all, the gods have built temples on the earth for a long time. The god of the desert, that is the god who controls the entire desert. The oasis where they live may be good or bad, all depends on whether the desert is peaceful or not. After the incomparable shock, the old man's face was red with excitement, and his temples were throbbing. At this moment, he had only one thought in his mind. That was that they were blessed by the god of the desert. Praise you, Lord God of the desert, the old man shouted loudly. The people behind him also shouted so, and were equally excited. It was also when they shouted the god of the desert that Seth saw the birth of the blank power of faith. This proved that they began to believe in themselves. The blank power fell on Seth and wanted to merge with Seth. However, Seth isolated these blank powers with divine power. After being isolated by Seth, they fell on the statue behind Seth. Instantly, they were all swallowed up by the golden feathers in the statue. Seth stared at the golden feathers, which were no different from when it did not absorb the blank power, and still exuded the breath of the sun. After watching for a while, Seth could not see why. It was also at this time that Seth smelled the smell of blood. He turned around and saw that the ragged slaves were being killed by the young and strong men wearing obsidian armor. The sharp obsidian dagger cut the throat, and blood gushed out. These slaves did not scream, wail, or fear. They calmly accepted death. When they died, a stream of bright red faith power was born. Seth stared at these bright red faith powers. They were more powerful than ordinary faith powers, but they were not as pure as blank faith power, and there was something mixed in them. But what exactly it was, Seth could not tell. If he integrated this bright red faith power, he might know what was mixed. Seth retracted his gaze and isolated all the bright red faith powers. Chapter 20 Creation Story. The fusion of the power of faith will pollute one's own authority. Seth could not do that. It would only harm himself. Although he was curious, he was not stupid. After Seth rejected the bright red power of faith, it fell on the statue. Ra's golden feathers also absorbed them. Seth took a look and then focused his attention on the dead in the temple. After a person dies, the soul will leave the body and become a dead soul. The dead soul goes to the Styx, and through the Styx to the underworld. It is the dead soul. These dead souls stood in place, kneeling on the ground fanatically, shouting praises to the god of the desert. However, no power of faith was born. Seth looked at the blood-stained floor tiles of the temple and moved his fingers. The golden water lilies on both sides of the temple absorbed all the blood, and all the dead souls were wrapped in lotus. They died in blood sacrifice to Seth, and Seth did not mind sending them to the underworld after night fell. It can also be regarded as a blessing after death. After all, not all dead souls can safely pass through the Styx and enter the underworld. The young and strong men who had killed all the slaves saw the blood disappear in an instant, and just shouted to praise the god of the desert. The old man in the lead spoke again respectfully, "Praise the god of the desert, Lord God of the desert. These are the 6 smartest children in the water-grass oasis. Please choose a child to become the servant who conveys your oracle." Seth looked at the old man with some surprise. Generally speaking, the servant who conveys the oracle is the priest of God. With this title, power, reputation, and wealth will follow. The old man is in good health and can live for at least another 30 years. He himself does not ask Seth to choose a priest, and he can become a priest himself. Although he was surprised, Seth looked at the 6 children carefully. He found that the 6 children were attached with the breath of magic. It seems that they all know magic. Not all humans know magic. Seth remembered that Isis mentioned this, and this is also one of the restrictions she imposed. I don't know if Isis will lift this restriction in the future. After thinking for a while, Seth said, "The boy with a scar on his forehead, I have chosen you." The boy responded quickly and said respectfully, "Praise you, Lord God of the desert. Your most loyal servant Damses swears to the god of the sun that he will always be loyal to Lord God of the desert." Yes, Seth was satisfied with this reaction. Then Seth used his divine power to create a statue as tall as a human head and placed it in front of Damses. Damses held the statue in both hands and praised loudly. Others also praised Seth. Seth isolated all divine power and wiped out all the corpses. The old man was very discerning and took Damses and others away. I wonder what changes this little boy can bring to his oasis. Seth was a little expectant. Among the 6 children, Damses had the strongest magic power and the most outstanding wisdom. The title of priest of the god of the desert would give him the right to decide the future of the oasis. Naturally, Seth would not interfere. After solving this matter, Seth stretched. A piece of papyrus floated in from outside the temple, with the aura of Thoth's divine power attached to it. It was Thoth's reply. Seth touched the papyrus, and it instantly disintegrated into a series of sacred texts. At the same time, a folded papyrus fell into Seth's hand. After reading it roughly, Thoth said that Hathor's affairs were more complicated. The details were all recorded on the paper, and Set was asked to read it himself. He also asked him to remember to send the paper back after reading it. Set opened the folded papyrus. A long, long time ago, there was no concept of time, space, and the world. Even at that time, there was no God. There was only chaos, and a flood that was endless, filled with darkness, death, and chaos. At some point, a sun rose in the flood. The sun brought light and dispelled some death and darkness. After an unknown period of time, the sun was embodied as a god. Seeing this, Set frowned. Is this a record of creation? There is this paragraph in his fused memory. When the original Set was imprisoned in the sky temple on the top of the mountain, Kebun had told him about it in bits and pieces. Why did Thoth show him this? Puzzled, Set decided to read on, because from his fused memories, Kebun had not told him the creation story properly. They just gave a general idea. The original Set had not learned about it after becoming a god. Thoth showed him this, probably not to tease him out of boredom. The sun-embodied god is the sun god Ra. After Ra was born, he looked at the chaos and the flood filled with darkness, death, and chaos. He felt very sad and lonely. The next moment, Ra's breath turned into two gods, Shu, the god of order, and Tefnut, the god of disorder. Ra was very happy to have two more children, and he believed that there must be other lives in the flood. He asked Shu and Tefnut to find them, and Ra waited there. After a long time, neither Shu nor Tefnut came back. Ra was extremely worried about the two children, so he took out his left eye. The left eye turned into a goddess, Hathor, the goddess of love. She was sent by Ra to find Shu and Tefnut. Hathor left Ra to find Shu and Tefnut, and finally found them. At this time, Shu and Tefnut had already married and gave birth to Keb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. With them, Hathor returned to Ra. Reunited with Ra, the gods were very happy. Only Hathor was very sad, because Ra's left eye had grown out, and she could not return to Ra's eye socket. Hathor was extremely sad and shed tears. The first human was born in Hathor's tears. Seeing this, Ra created the world and awakened all things. Then it was Set's familiar Apep who jumped out of the flood. Then Apep was killed by Ra, and the flood fell to the earth and became the Nile. This is all that is recorded on this papyrus. Set put down the papyrus and understood why Hathor said that humans were her children. It turned out that the first person was born from Hathor's tears. However, there should be other things that happened. What happened to the first person afterwards? Was he a boy or a girl? Hathor was so worried about humans. Why didn't she stay on the ground, but stayed in Heliopolis almost all the time? And did humans know that there were gods in the temple there, and believed in the blank power generated by gods? Because of Hathor, one question was solved, and a series of questions followed. Set folded the papyrus, rewrote the letter, and asked Thoth about his doubts. The words of the holy book turned into a yellow sand bird, and Set put the folded papyrus into the bird's body. The yellow sand bird flew out of the temple and went to find Thoth. Set began to look forward to Thoth's reply. However, what he expected most was that there was a god who dared to change the desert landscape. He had always wanted to kill the chicken to scare the monkey, but no god came to touch him. Chapter 21 The Book of True Names. At this time, Set felt that his divine power attached to the Hathor crystal disappeared. It should be a god who sent the seed of Hathor to Osiris. Set sat on the throne, thinking about what to make. He was too busy during this period. He first spent half a month looking for the blood river. From the perspective of the desert, because he was calculated by the blood river, he returned to the city of Heliopolis. Then there was Hathor's commission and human sacrifice. Fortunately, the gods are immortal and have more time, Set muttered, and began to consider using barbecue as a snack. However, the important thing about barbecue is spices and dipping sauce. Seth knew nothing about this. Sure enough, he still had to go to the gathering place of humans. After all, their spice trade was in full swing. When Set was thinking about this, a black cat with gold rings on both ears came to the entrance of the temple. Set sensed that it was Best walked in gracefully with cat steps, and glanced at the statue behind Set's throne with golden eyes, saying, You also accepted human sacrifices. I just obeyed Ra's oracle, Seth said lightly. Where is the bloody river? You said you found it? Best squatted on the ground and asked expectantly. Seth looked at Best with a serious expression. I did find it, but it seriously injured me and then ran away. Hearing this, Best's face was full of shock. Seriously injured you? Yes, Seth lied without changing his face. The power of that river gave me the illusion of facing Apep. Not only that, I also saw it swallowing a living person. Beth, you said that the river would avoid all living beings. You lied to me. Best shook his tail irritably and said, I didn't lie. Something must have happened. Seth sighed and said, you know, I just recovered from a serious injury. If it weren't for its power to be expelled, I would have repeated the mistake of being seriously injured by Apep before. So, tell me, what exactly is that river? After telling so many lies, Seth just wanted to know the details of the bloody river from Best. Best stood up and paced back and forth. She was hesitating whether to tell Seth what she knew. Seth sat on the throne and watched without urging her. After a long while, Best calmed down and stared at Seth. As usual, only you and I know about this. Swear to God Ra that what you say next is only known to you and me. Seth swore decisively. Seeing this, Best threw out her ankh, and the power of protection spread. After taking these precautions, Best was relieved. There is a book hidden in that long river, called the Book of True Names. I don't know when it was born, but Thoth said that the Book of True Names cleverly recorded the true name of each god, except for the gods that existed before the birth of the world. The true names of other gods are recorded in the Book of True Names. Seth was shocked. There is such a book? ! Doesn't that mean that his true name is also recorded on it? ! Seeing Seth's face change drastically, Best knew what Seth wanted to worry about. She said, don't worry. The Book of True Names will no longer record the true names of gods. Hearing this, Seth breathed a sigh of relief, and then became curious. Why? The most secret true names of gods are recorded. Best replied, it means that whoever gets this book will instantly have the authority of the gods. The authority of the gods is in the hands of one god, or one person, or one monster. It is a huge danger to the new world and the gods. The god of Ra found the hidden Book of True Names and burned it. But before being found by the god of Ra, the Book of True Names merged with the power of human faith. It used the power of a certain god to hide part of itself. Even the god of Ra did not realize that part of the Book of True Names was hidden. You mean, the Book of True Names has life? Seth realized the meaning of Best's words. Yes. It has life and consciousness. Best nodded helplessly. Seth gave up the decision to punish the bloody river at this moment. The Book of True Names hiding in that river even deceived the sun god Ra. With its strange power, it is best not to get close to it. However, Seth is very concerned about one thing. Since the Book of True Names has life, what is the true name of God recorded in it? It knows, and can use the true name to drive the corresponding authority at any time. Best confirmed Seth's guess. Seth had an impulse at this moment, telling Ra that the Book of True Names was still there. With Ra's strength, he would be able to easily destroy the bloody river. Also destroyed was the Book of True Names that liked to make random predictions. Best felt the murderous intent that Seth inadvertently revealed, and she hurriedly said, using the true name to drive the authority. The true name will be sensitive. The Book of True Names has been hiding from all living beings, just afraid of being discovered. It naturally dares not record the true name of God and use the true name of God again. After saying this, Seth suppressed the urge to report to Ra, and turned to look at Best. Best was so eager to find the bloody river. It must be for the Book of True Names. So she covets the true names of the gods! Should we report Best to Ra? Seeing that Seth's eyes were getting more and more hostile, Best shook his fur and said, your eyes are weird. What's wrong? Why are you looking for the Book of True Names? Seth looked directly into Best's eyes. Best stepped back and said, I want to know the true name of Khonsu. The true name of the moon god? Seth was stunned. Why do you want to know the true name of the moon god? I suspect Khonsu was killed. A trace of sadness flashed across Best's cat face. If I get his true name, I can use the power of the moon god to enter the temple where he is sleeping. Seth was silent. He couldn't confirm whether what Best said was true or false. After all, he didn't know anything about the moon god. He had no position to help or stop it. In the end, Seth said, "The moon god's affairs have nothing to do with me. I will no longer participate in the affairs of the Bloody River." Although he fabricated the story that the Bloody River beat him seriously, however, Seth didn't want to contact that strange power again. The means to restrain the Bloody River were already there, so there was no need to delve into it. Best was extremely irritated. Her cat ears tugged, and she begged, "I want you to help me, Seth. Something must have happened to the Bloody River." "Only me. I can't suppress it." "I can't help you," Seth refused coldly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Bird of Prophecy. Best didn't know much about Seth, but she knew Seth's character. She didn't plead anymore, turned around and left the temple. Seth watched Best leave. He didn't want to get involved in trouble. With eternal life and powerful strength, he just wanted to live a stable daily life. With a long sigh, Seth sorted out the information he had just received, and then left the temple. It has been a while since he got the moonlight wine. It's time to find a suitable snack for it. Outside the temple, Seth casually gave Aka his real name and summoned a new giant yellow sand bird. Lying on the back of the giant yellow sand bird, Seth said, "Go to the nearest oasis." He wanted to see if there were any spices that could be used for barbecue. Of course, it would be best if a merchant had already made a delicious barbecue secret recipe, then he could just buy it directly, saving himself from doing it himself. The sun was high in the sky. A group of crocodiles that were basking in the sun motionlessly by the river suddenly moved. They jumped back into the Nile River quickly, not daring to show their heads. Not long after, two gods wearing crowns passed by here. The breath of the gods made the crocodiles in the Nile tremble. These two gods were Nut, the goddess of the sky, and Keb, the god of the earth. "There are still 20 solar days until the next solar month," Keb said. "Let's stay at the source of the Nile for a while." Nut nodded, his eyes full of expectation. In 24 solar days, they will be able to see the god that Meets mentioned. Then they will wake up the moon god, and then find Isis to fulfill her promise. In the end, Meets will have life again and reunite with their family. Keb and Nut were immersed in happiness. In an oasis in the desert, caravans coming and going with a lot of goods stopped to trade. The people of the tribe living in this oasis welcomed the caravan. The children of the tribe ran around in the trading market excitedly. When they saw something new and rare, they stopped. "Brother, there is a talking bird over there." Suddenly, a little boy in blue pants shouted. The older boy heard it and immediately shouted the same sentence to other friends. Soon, a dozen children gathered and ran to the stall the little boy in blue pants mentioned. The stall was surrounded by dozens of adults, but fortunately the children were short and squeezed in between their legs. The stall owner was a middle-aged woman wearing a silver bracelet. She sat on a red wool carpet, holding a golden bird. The bird was not big, only the size of a child's fist, but its feathers seemed to be made of pure gold, shining in the sunlight. "I can predict the future, and it only costs 20 copper coins at a time." The golden bird spoke in a crisp child's voice. The onlookers were amazed. The children stared at the talking bird intently. Even a merchant carrying a cloth bag said, "I'll buy your golden bird for 10 gold coins." The onlookers talked a lot. Most of them were envious. A family of 4 in the oasis only needs 10 gold coins for half a year's food and drink. The middle-aged woman shook her head. "No sale." The merchant hesitated for a while, did not raise the price, did not threaten, did not speak, and did not leave. At this time, a tall and thin boy in his teens wearing a blue and white skirt took out 20 copper coins and put them into the pottery jar next to the middle-aged woman. "What do you want me to predict for you?" The golden bird looked at the boy with black bin eyes and asked, "Will I be rich in the future?" The boy said a little embarrassedly. The onlookers laughed. The golden bird buried its head in its left wing and made a crisp cry. The boy watched curiously. It is making a prediction," the middle-aged woman explained. After a while, the golden bird stuck its head out and said, "You will be rich, with your third brother, remember, with the third brother." "Yes," the boy nodded vigorously and squeezed out of the crowd and ran over. Some people who knew the boy believed it. The boy had 4 brothers in his family, so they also gave 20 copper coins to predict their own future. The woman's stall was popular until the evening, so she got up, packed up her things and left the market. The golden bird landed on her shoulder, attracting people's attention. "Do you think my prediction is accurate?" Suddenly, the golden bird spoke and asked the middle-aged woman. The middle-aged woman did not even turn her head back, and walked away, replying, "Very accurate." But he didn't believe it. He also said that you beat him severely and ate him alive. "Humphrey, nonsense," the golden bird said indignantly. "I kindly told him what would happen to him in the future, and told him how he could survive. He didn't believe it, and he wiped out my river water." The middle-aged woman stopped and looked at the golden bird. "You said that he would be with Nephthys." "Yes," the golden bird nodded. "But I don't think Seth loves Nephthys," the middle-aged woman said. "Your prediction is wrong." The golden bird snorted coldly and said, "Nephthys will be with him. If you don't believe it, just watch." After that, the golden bird disappeared out of thin air. The middle-aged woman had no expression on her face. Her body shrank rapidly, and she grew dense hair. In the blink of an eye, she turned into a black cat. The people around her turned a blind eye to it. The black cat jumped and disappeared. From the air, Seth was a little distressed on the oasis that looked like a pancake. He came to this oasis and was about to go down to investigate the food. A small skeleton ran in front of him, with Nephthys' power attached to it. After touching it, the skeleton disintegrated into holy text. The content was that Nephthys was going to his temple to find him. It was said that she got a rare flower from the tree spirit of the twisted forest. She wanted to appreciate the flowers with Seth. Although it was not said explicitly, Seth could feel it. Nephthys was still coveting him. Seth immediately replied with a letter, stating that there were some problems with his authority and he had to sleep and recuperate. He asked Nephthys not to disturb him, so as not to aggravate his injuries. At the end of the letter, Seth did not forget to introduce a god to Nephthys. Moss, the god of platinum, loves flowers and plants the most, and you must have a common language. Looking at this sentence, Seth nodded with satisfaction and sent the letter out. After doing all this, Seth asked Akit to take his ankh back to the temple. The ankh will emit divine power and cover the entire temple. This will prevent Nephthys from knowing that Seth was lying to her. Of course, it wouldn't matter if she knew. It's just that they will meet again in the future, so there's no need to make it too awkward. Akka obediently took the ankh back the same way. Seth concealed the breath of God and turned into an ordinary young man and landed on the edge of the oasis. At this time, night had fallen and the oasis was full of torches. Seth picked a direction at random and walked over. He wanted to check out whether the food in this oasis was delicious first. Chapter 23 Nephthys Wine. The oasis competition at night was very lively. The merchants brought rare treasures, men performing magic to make money, young men and women on dates, tribal children running around. Seth followed the flow of people and walked to a stall selling barbecue. To Seth's surprise, Seth smelled a fishy smell in front of this stall. However, there was no grilled fish on the stall. There was only grilled wolf meat, snake meat, and camel meat. After a careful look, Seth determined the source of the smell. It was oil in a pottery jar. After some barbecued meats were grilled, some oil would be poured on them at the request of the customers. The oil had a fishy smell. Seth didn't like the smell very much, but he also remembered what it was. It was cold-pressed linseed oil. If it is fried and then pressed for oil, it is sesame oil. "Give me 2 skewers of barbecued meat," Seth said. "What kind do you want?" asked the stall owner. "Snake meat and wolf meat." Seth didn't like the taste of camel meat. He paid the money, took the meat, and ate the meat while walking forward. "The barbecue is good, but it lacks salt. It can't be used as a side dish. What a pity." After quickly finishing the barbecue in his hand, Seth took a fancy to a stall selling stewed meat. However, before he bought anything, he was discouraged by the stall owner's black nails. "The hygiene conditions are not good. Bad review." Turning his head and leaving, Seth was about to move forward, A man with a pointed face and monkey cheeks came over and whispered, "Brother, do you want to see something exciting?" Seth was stunned for a moment, and then he was dissatisfied. "Does he look so indecent?" Seeing that Seth didn't speak, the man pointed his hand not far away and smiled obscenely. "She will be on stage in a while. How beautiful." Out of curiosity, Seth looked in the direction the man pointed. Next to a more hidden tent, a woman in a light gauze skirt stood there, smiling at Seth. Soft facial features, with a red flower pattern painted on the forehead, are very charming. Seth retracted his gaze and confirmed with the wretched man, "Are you talking about the person with the red flower pattern on his forehead?" The wretched man nodded vigorously. "It's her. Beautiful, isn't it? The ticket is only 50 copper coins, and 19 people have already paid. One more person, and we can have a show." Hearing this, Seth's mouth twitched and he turned away. The wretched man thought Seth was too expensive, so he chased after him and said, "Brother, if you think 50 copper coins are too expensive, how about 49? Seth stood still with a dark face and whispered, "Do you think I can't see that it's a man?" This sentence made the wretched man embarrassed and he stopped pestering. But Seth was very depressed. He concealed his original appearance and the young man he turned into should not look like a pervert. Unexpectedly, someone asked him to come and watch the show. While depressed, Seth walked to a wine stall and bought a ceramic cup of wine to taste. The fruity wine eased Seth's somewhat depressed mood. "Brother Seth." At this time, Seth heard someone calling him. Following the voice, he turned around and saw a woman with a beautiful face wearing a blue and white dress. "Nephthys, why are you here?" Seth was surprised. "I came to see you." Nephthys' eyes were full of resentment. Seth didn't know what to say, so he just said, "Oh." Then there was a long silence. In fact, Seth really wanted to ask Nephthys if she had received the letter. And when did she come? And whether she saw what happened just now. But he couldn't ask. "Brother Seth, let's go shopping together." Nephthys spoke to break the silence. "Okay." Seth did not refuse. As he walked, Seth took a sip of wine. The night market was still lively, and the wine that tasted good had not changed, but Seth wanted to leave. "Brother Seth, where is Best?" Nephthys asked. "Aren't you playing together?" At first glance, Seth didn't react why Nephthys asked Best. Then he remembered that he seemed to have said that he liked Best. She went to the nearby oasis to play tricks on people. Seth had no choice but to continue making up stories. "We agreed to wait for her here. I don't know why she always wants to play tricks on humans." "Brother Seth, don't you like what Best did?" Nephthys asked expectantly. "No." Seth shook his head, but put on a happy expression on his face. "But this is her hobby, so I can only let her do it. Seeing her happy makes me happy too." Fortunately, he had read many love manuals before, and pretending to be in love was easy. The expectation in Nephthys' eyes turned into disappointment, and she said nothing more. The two walked forward side by side. When passing by a stall selling stew, Nephthys said, "Brother Seth, buy some of this." "Okay." Seth did not refuse. When he passed by just now, he observed the hygiene of this stew, and the gaps between his fingers were clean. He bought a pottery pot of stew, and the taste of the compound spices increased the fragrance of the meat. Nephthys looked at Seth seriously and said, "Brother Seth, let's go to a place where no one is to eat." "Yeah," Seth agreed. Leaving the oasis, they arrived in the empty desert. Nephthys made tables and chairs with stones, and took out a pottery jar engraved with the pattern of the dead. "This is the beer I brewed with divine power. Brother Seth, try it." "Okay." Seth nodded. Sitting down, Seth divided the stew in the pottery jar into 2 bowls. Nephthys opened the mud seal on the wine jar. A mellow smell instantly filled Seth's breath. Seth frowned unconsciously and looked at Nephthys. "Did you brew the wine yourself?" "Yeah." Nephthys smiled and said, "I brewed it for Brother Seth." Hearing this, Seth did not ask any more questions, but only said, "Nephthys, you should have received the letter I sent you." The hand taking the wine paused, and Nephthys said, "Yes, but I want to see you." The golden beer was poured into the pottery cup, and Nephthys placed the wine in front of Seth with tears in her eyes. "Brother, I want you to have a taste. My heart is in it." Seth did not move, and said coldly, "I like Best, so I can't accept your feelings." "Nephthys, go back to Heliopolis, go to Hathor, Her power can make you see yourself clearly. Nephthys shed tears and looked at Set almost pleadingly. I will go, but you have to taste the wine I brewed for you. Glancing at the wine in front of him, Set shook his head. No, I should go. After saying that, Set turned and left. In a blink of an eye, Set's figure disappeared. Nephthys' face was full of sadness. She silently packed up everything and left. When Nephthys left completely, Set's figure reappeared here. Was it his own illusion? In the wine brewed by Nephthys, Set actually sensed the breath of Apep. Chapter 24, The Path to Power. However, Apep's breath was extremely weak. He didn't notice it at first, but a hot power suddenly surged out of his body. It was the residual power of the drop of blood that Ra gave him that made Set smell the subtle breath of Apep in the wine. But the breath was only in the wine, and Nephthys' body was pure and there was nothing unusual. So Set asked Nephthys to confirm the origin of the wine. Did Nephthys want to kill him because of love? However, with just that little bit of Apep's breath, he couldn't be killed. It couldn't even seriously injure him. However, these are not the most important things. The most important thing is that Set originally wanted to say that there was Apep's breath in the wine. However, his intuition told him that it would be dangerous to say it out. The intuition of the god of war has always been accurate. So, Set chose to withdraw. Standing there, Set was thinking at the moment, what should be done about this matter? Tell Ra? Seth thought about it and rejected it. He didn't keep the wine. There was no evidence. There is no evidence that Nephthys was contaminated by Apep's breath. However, Isis must be told about this. Let's discuss how to deal with it. After making the decision, Set was still uneasy. Whether it was best and the bloody river, or Nephthys and her wine, they all made him feel threatened in his own safety. He must be stronger to protect himself. But how to become stronger? Authority. The first thing Set thought of was to increase his authority. However, the problem is that the desert has occupied 80% of the earth. If he uses the desert to encroach on the remaining 20% of the forests, grasslands, swamps and other lands, it will definitely cause trouble for the gods and even be punished. As for war, which race can start a war? It seems that only humans can start a war, but the number of humans is too small. Others like tree spirits, orcs, monsters, and animals have limitations. In addition, the gods have temples on the earth to deter. Hundreds of races live peacefully and cannot start a war. The power and authority want to increase. The simplest and most convenient way is to increase the number of powerful lives. This will take time, a lot of time, maybe even an era. As for having the fourth authority, Set didn't expect it. Most of the main gods have triple authority. No one has quadruple authority. He thought that Ra would not give him new authority. Thus, his authority was blocked all the way. Set thought of the power of faith again, but he rejected it immediately. Integrating the power of faith would pollute his own authority. Not only would it not enhance his own power, but it would reduce his strength, and he would be regarded as an evil god and face the crusade of the gods. Standing on the opposite side of the gods would be like another Apep, but he didn't have Apep's immortality and the powerful power to counter Ra. After thinking about it, Set only felt despair. Wait, there is still hope. Set suddenly thought of the Book of True Names. If he got the true name recorded in the Book of True Names, even if he couldn't use it at ordinary times, but when it came to a critical moment, it would be his means of saving his life. After getting through the crisis, he would tell the Book of True Names and let it take the blame. The wrath of the gods and Ra will also be borne by the Book of True Names. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this plan was feasible. Set immediately returned to the temple. He wanted to merge with the desert again. Then he would look for the bloody river and ask the Book of True Names for the true names of the gods. The Book of True Names would definitely give him the true names. If not, the Book of True Names would face Ra's killing again. Yes, he would report the Book of True Names under his real name and it was still alive. After laughing for a while at his own wit, Set felt something was wrong. Doing this is a bit like being a villain. Forget it. A villain is a villain, and the true name must be obtained. Having made up his mind, Set returned to the temple. Above the dense forest, Nephthys sat expressionlessly on a small house. The moonlight was like water, falling on her. Your plan to marry Set with wine has failed. Suddenly, A man's voice came from the small house. "I know," Nephthys said coldly. "He rejected me again and again." Beth changed his heart. "What are your plans next?" The man's voice asked again. "Seth is not irreplaceable," Nephthys said coldly. "Just find another god, a god that is beneficial to my plan." "Do you need my help?" the man's voice asked. "Not help," Nephthys sneered. "It's to fulfill your promise. The contract we signed is very clear. It's my fault." The man's voice apologized immediately, and then said, "But Isis seems to be planning something. You should pay more attention to her movements." "Yeah," Nephthys responded. In the Yellow Sand Temple, Ago, who sent the seeds of Hathor to Osiris, has returned. Said let it play with Ika, and he was busy. Before merging with the desert, Seth thought for a while. He decided not to tell Isis about Nephthys in advance. The last time he merged with the desert, it took half a month to find the bloody river. It might take that long this time, whether communicating by letter or talking face to face. Seth couldn't spare the energy, so he had to wait until he finished threatening the Book of True Names. After giving the Ankh power and covering the temple, just when he wanted to merge with the desert, he saw the blank power attached to the statue and swallowed by Ra's golden feather. It seems that those people are worshipping him again. In addition to this, a piece of papyrus came to the outside of the temple. Seth put the papyrus in. It floated in front of Seth, and Seth touched the papyrus. In an instant, the papyrus disintegrated into a series of sacred texts. It was Thoth's reply. After reading it, Seth frowned. Thoth told Seth that he could not answer Seth's question. Hathor was a god who existed before the creation of the world and was older than him. Tears created humans, and the first human and Hathor also happened at the beginning of the creation. At that time, he, the god of wisdom, had not yet been born, so he had not personally experienced those things. The gods who had experienced them were reluctant to say more about those things. Therefore, up to now, Thoth has only recorded the creation of human beings by tears. However, Thoth also believes that the ability of human beings to distinguish them from other intelligent life forms is due to the influence of Hathor's power. However, human beings have been multiplying for hundreds of thousands of years. The influence of Hathor's power on them is probably negligible. This is the content of Thoth's letter. Seth was disappointed that the ancient secrets did not get an answer, but he did not care too much. Uncovering the ancient secrets will not increase his power, but only satisfy his curiosity. That is not necessary. Power is necessary. Calming down his mood, Seth mobilized his authority. The nearly infinite divine power transformed by the triple authority burst out. Seth merged with the desert again. With the temple as the source, vision and consciousness spread out rapidly like flowing water. Chapter 25 Betrayal and Disappearance. At the source of the Nile, a temple built of sky blue crystal stands. Kebnut watched the rising sun, representing the supreme god. They have never felt so excited. Even after the birth of the world, when the gods witnessed Ra killing Apep, when the sun broke through the darkness and shone on the earth again, they were not as excited as today. Keb couldn't suppress the smile on his face, and opened his mouth to call out their children, the names that Meets told them. But Nut stared at the slowly rising sun and said, "Wait a little longer. It will take time for Ra to enter the underworld." "Yeah," Keb nodded vigorously. Time passed little by little, and there was no trace of darkness on the earth. The coldness of the night had dissipated, and the light and heat of the sun came again. Nut set his sights on the source of the Nile, which is the end of the earth. "Amon," Nut shouted softly. Keb also shouted, "Amon." After waiting for a moment, nothing happened. Nut and Keb's faces both changed. "Is hope going to be shattered again?" You too, welcome to my residence. Suddenly, a strange voice came from the side. Keb and Nut were excited at first, then alert, and then they looked in the direction of the voice. They saw a handsome male god wearing a golden goose feather crown, wearing a blue and gold skirt, and smiling. The gentle smile did not let Keb and Nut let down their guard. Instead, it made them more alert and vigilant, because after the birth of the world, they have seen all the gods who were born. But, among the more than 2,000 gods, there is no god in front of them. But the strange god has the pure breath of God, not the evil god created by faith. Keb stepped forward, protected Nut behind him, and asked, "What god are you?" I am Amon. The god who called himself Amon smiled. There is no Amon among the gods. Keb shook his head. Amon asked back, is there Meets, the god of stars, among the gods? No, but Meets asked you to come to me. Just because you don't know doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Nut took a deep breath, walked to Keb, and said, God Amon, Meets said you can awaken the moon god Khonsu. Please, help us awaken Khonsu. I can awaken Khonsu, but I need your help. Amon smiled. As long as we can do it, Nut answered without hesitation. Keb made the same promise. Amon took off a golden goose feather from the crown on his head and handed it to Nut. Accept human sacrifices, and then place the goose feather on the heart of the statue. When the goose feather no longer absorbs the power generated by faith, I can awaken Khonsu. Nut looked at the golden goose feather and hesitated. Accept human worship, protect humans, and then used the golden feather to eliminate the power of faith. These are what the oracle of Ra asked the gods to do. Using the goose feather of Amon, whose origin is unknown, to absorb the power of faith is against the oracle of Ra. And what does Amon do with the power of faith? Nut hesitated due to various speculations. At this time, Keb took the golden goose feather from Amon's hand. Meets had no life, but could communicate with them, and they had never seen the god before. They did not tell Ra what they thought. In addition, they came to Amon for help after Ra entered the underworld for inspection, which was already an act of betrayal. Since they had already betrayed, one more time or one less time would not make much difference. Amon took back his hand and smiled. Smart choice. Come back to me when the goose feather is full. Remember the rules. On the 4th solar day of each solar month, you must avoid the supreme god. After giving instructions, Amon disappeared in front of the two gods. Being able to disappear without leaving a trace in front of them proved that Amon's power was not weaker than theirs. Let's go back. Keb put away the many speculations in his mind and said. Nut was a little tired and responded softly, At the junction of the forest and the grassland, in the temple built by giant trees and flowers, Isis sat by the window and pondered. Osiris walked to Isis excitedly with a handful of golden wheat ears. Isis, look, the new barley has been successfully cultivated. Isis came back to her senses and looked at the wheat ears in Osiris's hand. She could feel that there was a full breath of life in them. Is it cultivated from Hathor's seeds? Yes. Osiris nodded. The seed she sent will not weaken even after many generations. It can only be said that it is worthy of the power of the sun. A trace of desire flashed in Isis's eyes. Yes, the power of the sun is so strong. Osiris inserted the wheat ears into the pottery on the side and said, Isis, do you know who still has the sun wine given by Ra? Sun wine? Isis was stunned, then said, are you greedy? No. Osiris shook his head. The new wheat seeds will not be affected by the breath of the desert, resulting in a decrease in yield. The number of humans living in the oasis will definitely increase. With seeds and water magic, the oasis will definitely expand. By then, I'm afraid Set's authority will be damaged. So you want to use sun wine to shut my mouth? Isis continued. No. Osiris shook his head again. I'm not trying to shut you up. I'm expressing my apology. After all, the expansion of the oasis and the development of agriculture have enhanced my authority. Isis thought for a moment and said, Thoth should have it. I heard him showing off to Shu before, but he probably won't be willing to hand it over. Who knows when the next main god will be born? Osiris sighed helplessly. Give it a try. Maybe he'll be willing. By the way, Isis suddenly said, ask Mot for help. Mot is easier to talk to than Thoth. Maybe she'll help persuade Thoth. In the yellow sand temple, Seth held his face with one hand and sat expressionless. Bad news, the blood river is gone. He merged with the desert and spent nearly a month searching the entire desert, but there was no trace of the blood river. Did the blood river know that he was going to blackmail it and ran away in advance? No, it's more likely that it hid. After all, the Book of True Names could even fool La. But which god's authority can deceive the supreme god? Seth frowned. He couldn't think of the answer. Not only that, his only way to strengthen himself was also blocked. Sighing, Seth no longer dwelled on this matter. Since he couldn't get the real name, he would just treat it as an extra piece of information. When the time is right, he would tell Ra that the book of the real name still exists and seek benefits for himself. After making a decision, Seth stood up and put away the ankh. He was going to find Isis to discuss the matter of Nephthys. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.